Welcome. You've arrived in a calm and quiet place. If you're here, it's probably because you want to relax, to let your mind drift, or perhaps to fall asleep. You're in the right place. Tonight, we'll wander together into the distant world of the Middle Ages, where life was very different from ours, and sometimes more difficult than we can imagine. Before we begin, I'd like to gently remind you, if you find comfort in these videos, if they help you relax, or if you simply enjoy the stories, please take a moment to like the video and consider subscribing to the channel. It's a small gesture, but it means a lot, and it helps me continue creating more of these calming journeys for you. You might also let this video play quietly in the background while you rest, while you work, or while you drift into sleep. There's no need to focus on every word. Just let the rhythm of the voice carry you, like the sound of a soft breeze, as your imagination slowly opens. Now, close your eyes. Let your shoulders relax. Breathe slowly and deeply. And together, let's step back into the Middle Ages, to explore what it was like to live, and sometimes to struggle, in a world so far away. Imagine yourself in a medieval town at dusk. The streets are narrow, the stones uneven beneath your feet, the air heavy with the mingling scents of smoke, sweat, and animals. Torches flicker on the walls, casting shadows that stretch and sway. People hurry to finish their tasks, for night is not a safe time to linger outside. And somewhere among these people, perhaps at the edge of the crowd, is one who has broken a law. Maybe they are a thief, slipping through alleys to avoid notice. Maybe they are simply accused, guilty in the eyes of neighbors before any trial has begun. In this world, suspicion alone could brand you a criminal. And once the whisper spread, life would never be the same. The laws were many, and they were strict. To steal bread, to poach a rabbit from the Lord's forest, to speak against the church, to strike another in anger each, could be judged as crime. There was no softness, no mercy written into the codes. Punishments were not meant only for the guilty, but as warnings to the watching crowd. To be accused meant to carry a heavy shadow, one that could follow you into every corner of your days. Picture now the feeling of being accused. You walk through the market, and voices fall silent. Eyes follow you, not with kindness, but with suspicion. Neighbors turn away or whisper when you pass. Perhaps you know you have done what they say. Perhaps you know you are innocent. In the Middle Ages, it mattered little. What mattered was what others believed, what the judge declared, what the church pronounced. A single accusation could unravel your life, leaving you exposed, marked, feared. Close your eyes and imagine the weight of this. The streets you once walked freely now feel narrow, pressing, filled with faces that no longer greet you as friend. You are not only yourself anymore. You are the criminal, the accused, the one whose fate hangs in the balance. The night feels colder, the day sharper, and every sound footsteps, whispers, shouts, seems pointed, aimed at you. In truth, to be a criminal in those days was not always to have committed what we might call a crime today. Hunger drove many to steal. Anger led to fights. Desperation led to trespass. Yet the law rarely cared for reasons. The law cared only for order, for obedience, for making examples. And so, many who found themselves branded criminals were not wicked, but merely unlucky, caught in a moment when survival clashed with the rules of the land. Imagine for a moment that you are such a person. Hunger has gnawed at your stomach for days. You take a loaf of bread, quickly, quietly, hoping no one sees. But someone does. They cry out. Hands grab you, rough and strong. The crowd gathers, eyes sharp, voices rising. You feel yourself pulled away, accused, named thief, criminal, sinner. And in that instant, you know your life will never return to what it was. The streets echo with your name, no longer spoken in kindness, but in condemnation. The world feels smaller, heavier, as though the walls themselves lean closer, pressing you inward. You are not yet punished, not yet judged, and already the weight of guilt is upon you. To be accused in the Middle Ages was to be half condemned already, and the shadow of that truth falls heavy across your nights. Breathe slowly, deeply, and let yourself feel this rhythm of another life. The world of the Middle Ages was harsh, unforgiving, and to be a criminal within it was to live under constant watch, constant suspicion, constant fear. Yet in this quiet moment, drifting on the edge of sleep, you are safe. You are only wandering through memory, through history, through the whispers of lives long gone. Let the weight of those shadows settle softly in your imagination as the night carries you further, deeper into calm. The moment of capture in the Middle Ages was the true dividing line in a person's life. Until then, there was always the faint hope of escape, of blending into the crowd, of slipping away into the forests or hiding among strangers. But once hands closed around your arms, once ropes bound your wrists, the freedom of yesterday became only memory. The world narrowed into the grip of your captors and the eyes of the crowd. Imagine the rough cobblestones beneath your feet as you are dragged through the streets. People step aside, not with pity, but with curiosity. Some mutter curses, some cross themselves, others simply stare. In their eyes, you are no longer one of them. You are marked now, separated, set apart. Children point, adults whisper. The weight of judgment presses from every corner. The sound of your footsteps seems loud, echoing in rhythm with the thud of your heart. The guards or townsmen who hold you are not gentle. Their task is not comfort but control. They lead you through alleys that smell of damp and rot, toward places most people avoid. Perhaps it is the town jail, a low stone building near the market square. Perhaps it is the castle dungeon, carved into cold earth beneath thick walls. Wherever it is, you know that from the moment the door closes, your world will be reduced to darkness, to straw, to silence, broken only by groans of others. Close your eyes now, and picture this space. The cell is small, its walls rough, damp with moisture that seeps from the ground. The air is heavy, filled with the smell of mold, unwashed bodies, and smoke from torches that sputter in the hall. Straw lies scattered on the floor, but it is thin, scratchy, alive with small crawling things. The single window high above lets in only the faintest sliver of light. You sit there, your hands bound, your body aching, and the weight of reality begins to press against you. In those days, imprisonment was not always meant as punishment in itself. It was often a waiting place between accusation and judgment, between capture and execution, between life and whatever might follow. Time in a dungeon was uncertain. Days and nights blurred into one another, broken only by the sound of keys turning in locks, the shuffle of feet, the occasional cry of another prisoner. You are given little food, perhaps bread hard enough to crack your teeth, perhaps a bowl of watery soup, perhaps nothing at all when the guards are cruel. Thirst burns in your throat, and the water, when it comes, tastes of rust and stones. Sleep is restless, broken by cold, by hunger, by the shifting bodies of others chained nearby. Yet your body still yields, still collapses into uneasy dreams, because exhaustion is stronger than fear. Imagine lying on that straw, your body curled tight against the chill, your ears filled with the distant drip of water, the muffled sound of chains clinking as someone shifts in their bonds. You close your eyes, but the darkness feels no different than when they are open. Your thoughts wander to your family, to the streets outside, to the bread that brought you here, or the quarrel that turned to violence, or the words spoken against you. You replay it all again and again, but nothing changes. The walls remain, the chains remain, the waiting stretches endlessly. Prisons then were not places of rehabilitation. They were holding grounds, symbols of authority, reminders to all who passed by that the law could seize anyone at any time. To be within one was to feel the weight of power pressing down, heavy, immovable. There was no appeal, no comfort, no hope but in mercy, and mercy was rare. And yet, even in such darkness, people found moments of strange calm. The monotony dulled the mind. The drip of water became a rhythm, the shuffle of feet a pattern, the silence itself a kind of lull. Fear did not vanish, but it softened into a heavy weariness, a surrender to the inevitability of fate. Breathe slowly now, and imagine yourself drifting into that weariness. The straw rustles beneath you, the air chills your skin, the sounds of chains echo faintly. You do not know what tomorrow will bring, but for this moment your body gives in, your breath steadies, your eyes close. Just as they did long ago, you surrender to the night. Even in the depths of stone and shadow, carried by exhaustion into uneasy rest, time inside the dungeon is heavy. Hours stretch without meaning, days blur together, and you lose track of when the sun rises or sets. You measure time by the footsteps of guards, by the rattle of keys, by the thin scraps of food brought to you. Each sound becomes a marker, each silence a reminder of how forgotten you are. The body aches from cold stone, from hunger, from stillness. The mind drifts between fear and numbness, wandering into memories of life before, wondering if such moments will ever return. And yet, beyond the walls, the world does not forget you entirely. The town speaks of you. Your name is whispered in markets, your crime debated in taverns. Some call you guilty, others pity you, but all agree that your fate now rests in the hands of those with power. In the Middle Ages, justice was not a quiet matter. It was a performance, a display meant to remind the people of authority. The longer you wait in the darkness, the closer you come to that stage. Imagine the summons when it comes. The door creaks open, light floods in, blinding after so many days in gloom. You are pulled to your feet, chains biting into your wrists, the straw falling from your clothes as you stumble forward. The guards do not speak much. Their grip tells you all you need to know. You are to face judgment. The hall where justice is dispensed feels vast after the closeness of your cell. At its center sits the Lord, or perhaps the magistrate, robed in authority, eyes sharp and unyielding. At his side, scribes scratch notes with quills, recording words that may shape your fate. Before him, the crowd gathers, neighbors, strangers, all eager to see what will become of the accused. Their faces blur together, a sea of curiosity and condemnation. Close your eyes and feel the weight of that moment. Every whisper, every glance is fixed on you. You stand in chains, your clothes torn, your body weak. You are asked questions, some simple, some impossible. Did you steal? Did you strike? Did you speak words against the church? Sometimes there is no proof, no evidence, only testimony, rumor, suspicion. Yet each word carries weight, and each answer pulls the scales closer to one side. For many, the trial is swift. Few had advocates, fewer still the chance to defend themselves fully. The voice of the Lord, or the judgment of the priest, often decided matters before they began. To be accused was to already stand halfway toward guilt, and innocence was a difficult prize to win. Even so, you speak your words trembling in the hall, hoping they will find mercy, or at least hesitation, in the hearts of those who judge you. The crowd watches, eager for outcome. In their eyes, your fate is less about you and more about the lesson it carries. If you are condemned, they will speak of it as warning. If you are spared, they will speak of it as rare mercy. Either way, your life is no longer only yours. It belongs to the spectacle, to the story told about crime and justice in the Middle Ages. And when the judgment is given, it falls like a hammer, whether it is prison again, or the stocks, or worse, the moment strips away hope. The hall echoes with voices, some gasping, some muttering, some silent in uneasy satisfaction. You are led away once more, chains heavy, steps unsteady, heart caught between fear and resignation. Yet even here, in the shadow of punishment, there is a strange stillness. The waiting is over. The uncertainty fades. You know now the shape of what is to come, and in knowing, some part of your fear quiets. The mind drifts again, softer now, no longer struggling against the unknown. You surrender, not because you wish to, but because there is no choice. Breathe slowly, deeply, and let yourself feel this surrender. Imagine the sound of chains, the murmur of the crowd, the weight of judgment in the air. Then let it all fade, softening into silence, as though you are drifting once more into the quiet of night, just as those long ago yielded to their fate, yield now to calm, to stillness, to rest. When a man or woman was named a criminal in the Middle Ages, the punishment rarely ended with them alone. The weight of crime stretched outward, pressing upon family, upon children, upon all who carried the same name. To be related to a criminal was to inherit shame, to live under suspicion, to walk with the same shadow though you had committed no crime yourself. Imagine a wife standing in the crowd as her husband is led to the gallows. The rope hangs, the priest murmurs, the crowd whispers. Her face is pale, her hands trembling, but she cannot turn away. The man she once called protector, provider, father of her children, is now called thief, heretic, murderer. When the rope tightens, the crowd gasps, but her silence holds. She knows that her life has changed forever. She will not be remembered as herself. She will be remembered as the wife of a criminal. Close your eyes and picture her walking home afterward. Neighbors watch from doorways, their eyes filled with pity, with judgment, with fear. Some whisper words of comfort, others avoid her entirely, as though the crime might spread like sickness. Children stare, pointing, repeating the words they heard from parents. Her husband was hanged. Her family is cursed. The path she walks is heavy, not from her own guilt, but from the burden placed upon her by others. Children bore the mark most of all. A son might be called the thief's boy, a daughter whispered about as the witch's child. In school, in fields, in markets, the label clung, shaping their futures. Some were denied work, denied marriage, denied friendship. The sins of the father or mother became chains that bound the next generation, long after the crime was punished. For families, survival became harder. Property might be seized, fines demanded, homes taken as payment for crime. What little remained had to be stretched thin, bread shared in smaller pieces, fires burned lower for lack of fuel. Hunger became constant, not because of their own acts, but because of punishment passed down. Families often slipped into poverty, not by their own choices, but by the shadow of one judgment. Some tried to hide their connection, moving to distant villages, changing names, praying the past would not follow. Yet whispers traveled, carried by traders, by travelers, by memory itself. That one, they would say, is from the family of the condemned. No distance was far enough to escape completely. The mark lingered, quiet but sharp, a reminder that crime in the Middle Ages was rarely private, rarely forgotten. And still, families endured. Mothers worked in fields. Fathers begged mercy from lords. Children grew in silence, carrying shame with quiet strength. Some turned inward, avoiding crowds, living at the edges of villages, unseen but always remembered. Others resisted, declaring loudly that they would not be judged for another's acts. Yet resistance rarely erased suspicion. The community, bound together by fear of disorder, kept the mark alive. Imagine yourself as one of these children. You walk through the market, the smell of bread filling the air, the sound of voices rising. Yet when you pass, the voices hush. You feel the eyes upon you, sharp, cold, filled with memory not of you, but of someone else. You carry a shadow you did not choose, a weight you cannot lift. Even your silence feels judged, as though your very breath might betray you. Breathe slowly, deeply, and let yourself sink into this thought. In the Middle Ages, crime did not belong only to the criminal. It spread like smoke, clinging to those closest, settling into homes, into names, into futures. To be family of a criminal was to inherit punishment without chains, to live with whispers instead of ropes, with hunger instead of fire, with shame instead of iron. And in many ways that punishment lasted longer, for it did not end with death, but with memory that lingered for generations. The punishment of a crime in the Middle Ages stretched outward like ripples in water. When one person was condemned, their family often felt the greater weight, not from law alone, but from the judgment of the community. Neighbors, friends, even distant kin looked upon them differently. To live as family of a criminal was to live inside a prison without walls, a place shaped by whispers, glances, and silence. Imagine a small village square. The market is alive with voices, the smell of bread, the clatter of carts. A woman arrives with her children, hoping to buy food. At first, no one speaks. Then whispers spread. Her husband was hanged. Her brother confessed. Their family carries shame. The baker hesitates before selling her bread. The butcher avoids her eyes. Some turn away altogether, refusing trade. Others sell begrudgingly, muttering as coins pass from her hand. What should be simple, a meal for her children, becomes heavy with suspicion. Close your eyes and picture the faces of neighbors. Some look with pity, their brows furrowed, their voices low. Others glare openly, as though the crime were theirs to avenge. Children whisper to one another, laughing nervously, repeating harsh words they barely understand. Each glance, each whisper, is a stone added to the burden already carried. The woman leaves quickly, her children clutching her hands, her back bent not from age but from shame. Communities often believed that the family carried the same stain as the criminal. They feared that curses might linger, that sin might pass through blood, that God's wrath might fall on all who showed kindness. Families were sometimes exiled, forced to leave homes and land, driven to wander roads with nothing but what they could carry. Imagine walking away from a village you once called home, your house now empty, your fields abandoned, your footsteps uncertain. The road stretches long, your children stumble in the dust, and behind you the gates close with finality. Even when exile was not demanded, suspicion was constant. Families lived at the edge of villages, their homes avoided, their visits unwelcome. Work was denied, marriages refused, friendships severed. They became outsiders within their own world, visible yet invisible, present yet always set apart. and yet compassion sometimes pierced the silence. A neighbor might slip bread at night, leaving it by a door without word. A priest might speak gently, reminding others that mercy was as holy as judgment. A friend might stand quietly beside the family in church, refusing to step away though others shifted in their seats. These moments did not erase the shame, but they softened it, like small flames flickering in a vast darkness. Imagine yourself as a child in such a family. You play in fields, the grass tall and soft, the sun warm. But when you return, you hear voices. Other children are called back by their mothers, forbidden to play with you. You sit alone, your laughter fading, your heart heavy with a weight you do not understand. You ask your mother why, and she has no answer except silence, except the tears she hides from your eyes. The community's treatment was not always cruel in action, but it was cruel in memory. The family became a symbol of disorder, a living reminder of what happens when rules are broken. Even if they lived quietly, even if they worked hard, even if years passed, the shadow remained. People remembered, and memory in the Middle Ages was strong, tied not only to names but to stories retold again and again. Breathe slowly, and let yourself drift into this thought. In those times, crime was never an individual act. It was a wound that spread outward, cutting into families, staining them with shame, reshaping their lives. To be kin of a criminal was to walk in silence, to endure suspicion, to live between pity and rejection. And though kindness sometimes broke through, it was never enough to lift the shadow completely. The punishment lingered, softer than chains, but heavier than stone, binding not the body, but the life that stretched ahead. Not all families of criminals in the Middle Ages bent completely beneath the weight of shame. Some endured, some resisted, some even sought ways to transform dishonor into strength. To be bound by another's crime was a heavy burden, but survival required more than silence. It required quiet defiance, steady resilience, and a determination to carry on even when the world turned its face away. Imagine a widow left alone with her children after her husband's execution. The land has been seized. The neighbors whisper. The market turns cold. She does not leave, though many expect her to. Instead, she gathers wood, tills what soil she can, teaches her children to work alongside her. Each day is harder than the last, but each day lived is proof that she will not disappear. The whispers continue, but she keeps her head high, her eyes forward. In silence, she resists. Close your eyes and picture a son grown from such hardship. He remembers the shame of his father's chains, the laughter of other children, the coldness of the crowd. Yet he learns skills. He takes work in distant fields. He grows strong. Slowly, he builds a life of his own, carrying the memory but not allowing it to define him. Some still call him by his father's crime, but he answers with labor, with quiet persistence, until his name becomes his again. Families sometimes sought redemption through faith. A daughter might enter a convent, devoting her life to prayer, hoping to cleanse the stain of her family's name. A son might take the cross, marching toward distant lands on crusade. His sword lifted not for crime, but for God. These acts did not erase memory, but they shifted it, reshaping whispers into softer tones, turning judgment into something closer to respect. Others chose distance. They left villages behind, carrying little more than their names, or sometimes abandoning even that. In new towns, among strangers, they built fresh lives, hoping the past would not follow. For some, it worked. For others, the memory returned, carried by travelers, by merchants, by the endless spread of stories. Still, the attempt was defiance in itself, a refusal to be crushed entirely by another's crime. Imagine a family sitting quietly in their cottage, firelight flickering on weary faces. Outside, the village gossips still. Inside, they share bread, thin but warm, and speak softly of the future. They do not know what tomorrow will bring, but they cling to each other, finding strength in closeness. Though the world condemns them, within those walls they are still whole, still human, still bound not by shame but by love. Some carried memory as quiet rebellion. A mother might tell her children not only of their father's crime, but of the reasons behind it: hunger, desperation, injustice. She would whisper that he was not only a thief, but a man who wanted to feed his family. She would remind them that guilt was not always simple, that crime was sometimes survival. In this way, she passed down not only shame, but defiance, giving her children a truth that the crowd would never admit. For others, the memory of crime became warning. They told their children never to stray, never to anger lords or priests, never to test the law's strength. Fear shaped obedience, obedience shaped lives. The shadow of crime became a guide, harsh but protective, a reminder carved into family memory that safety lay in silence, in humility, in never drawing attention. Breathe slowly, deeply, and let yourself feel the weight of these lives. Families of criminals carried chains that could not be seen, but they also carried resilience that could not be broken. They worked, they prayed, they resisted, they endured. Though society tried to erase them, they found ways to survive, to hold on to dignity, to carve small spaces of peace within a hostile world. In the Middle Ages, punishment stretched beyond the criminal, but it did not always destroy. Sometimes it forged quiet strength, passed down like a secret inheritance, shaping generations not in despair, but in endurance. Some people in the Middle Ages bore the name of criminal not only once, but again and again. For them, crime was not a single act, but a way of life, a shadow that clung to them from youth until death. These were the repeat offenders, men and women who found themselves always at the edges of law, slipping from one punishment into another, never escaping the gaze of authority or the whispers of the crowd. Imagine a man known in his village for theft. As a boy, he stole apples from orchards, bread from stalls, coins left too carelessly on tables, caught, beaten, forgiven, but never forgotten. As he grew, hunger and habit carried him deeper. Chickens vanished from coops, Tools disappeared from barns. Grain sacks lightened mysteriously. Each time, the suspicion turned toward him, whether guilty or not. His name was already marked. The community needed no proof, only memory. Close your eyes and picture his life. Work is denied him, for who would trust a thief? Friends are few, for who would stand beside one already condemned? He wanders from place to place, carrying hunger with him, stealing again because there is nothing else. Each act deepens the mark, until the word thief is no longer accusation but identity. He becomes less a man and more a story, told to children as warning, pointed out in taverns as example. Some repeat offenders became wanderers, drifting between villages, living on scraps, on cunning, on chance. They slept in barns, in fields, in forest clearings, never staying long enough for welcome, never leaving before suspicion followed. Others remained in one place, tolerated because they were known, yet always at the edge, always excluded. They were part of the village, yet never truly of it. For women, the path was often harsher. A woman accused once of theft or witchcraft carried that name for life. Even if cleared, even if forgiven, suspicion lingered. Neighbors watched her closely, avoiding her touch, whispering when she passed. If a child sickened, if milk soured, if bread failed to rise, the finger pointed back to her. Once marked, she was rarely free. Her life became one long trial, stretched across years, punctuated by whispers instead of chains. Some criminals embraced the name given to them. An outlaw might boast of raids. A thief might laugh at his own cunning. A woman cold which might play into the fear, muttering curses to keep others away. In doing so, they took control of the label, turning shame into weapon. Yet, even then, freedom was fragile. The law did not forget, and sooner or later, rope, fire, or blade claimed them. Imagine a man sitting by a tavern fire, his face lined with age, his hands rough from years of wandering. Around him, men whisper, pointing, calling him by names he has carried for decades. He does not deny them. He drinks quietly, his eyes fixed on the flames, as though the fire itself holds all the memories of his life. He is no longer surprised by the whispers. They are as constant as breath. He has lived too long with them to hope for silence. The lives of repeat offenders were filled with tension. Each day was survival, each night uncertain. They knew the roads better than most, the hiding places in forests, the barns left unlocked, the faces likely to show mercy. They lived in a world narrower than others, yet sharper, each choice carrying more risk, each moment balanced between hunger and capture. Breathe slowly and let yourself drift into this world. The repeat criminal of the Middle Ages was not only a figure of crime, but of endurance. They carried labels heavier than chains. They bore suspicion sharper than blades. They lived lives stretched between defiance and despair. To be such a person was to live always at the edge of society, part of it yet apart, surviving day by day, until the law claimed them, or age itself ended the story. To live one's whole life under suspicion in the Middle Ages was to live with a shadow that never lifted. For the repeat criminal, guilt and innocence mattered less than memory. Once accused, once punished, the mind became shaped by the expectation of being watched, judged, and condemned again. The body carried scars of punishment, but the mind carried scars of suspicion. Imagine the feeling of waking each morning, knowing that eyes will follow you wherever you go. In the market, every movement of your hands is noticed. If a coin falls, someone wonders if you will pocket it. If a loaf of bread goes missing, your name is the first spoken. Even if you are blameless that day, the whisper clings. The weight of constant suspicion presses heavier than chains, bending spirit as surely as iron bends flesh. Close your eyes and picture such a life. At first, you protest, you swear innocence, you beg for trust, you promise change. But time wears away at protest. Each denial is met with laughter, with disbelief, with silence. Slowly, the voice grows quiet. The mind learns that resistance is useless. You stop declaring innocence and begin to carry the name as part of yourself. Thief, they call you, and you stop correcting them. Outlaw, they whisper, and you nod in silence. The label becomes identity, etched into the mind as deeply as scars into the body. The psychology of such a life twists in different ways. Some criminals turn inward, becoming wary, silent, suspicious of all. They trust no one, for they expect betrayal at every turn. Friendships fade. Love is distant. Laughter grows rare. Their hearts close, hardened by years of rejection. Others turn outward, leaning into the name given to them. If they are called thief, they will steal boldly. If they are called outlaw, they will fight openly. In embracing the accusation, they regain a strange kind of control, shaping the world's judgment into their own choice. But most live somewhere in between, torn between defiance and despair. At times they dream of redemption, of proving themselves, of being welcomed once more. At other times they give in, letting crime carry them like a current they no longer resist. Their minds flicker between hope and surrender, never finding peace, always restless. Imagine sitting alone in a darkened hut, the fire burned low, the night pressing close. You listen to the wind, 2 distant dogs barking, 2 footsteps that may or may not be real. Every sound feels sharper, heavier. Your heart quickens, though you do not move. You wonder if tonight will be the night they come for you, or if tomorrow will be the day your name is spoken once more with accusation. Even in silence, suspicion speaks loudly. The mind begins to change under such pressure. Dreams are filled with pursuit, with chains, with fire. Waking thoughts are filled with plans of escape, of hiding, of survival. Anxiety becomes constant. Fear becomes familiar. Yet strangely, so does resilience. Those who live long in suspicion learn to endure, to expect nothing, to rely on themselves alone. They become watchful, cunning, patient, not always by choice, but by necessity. And still, loneliness is the deepest wound. To be mistrusted is to be cut off, to be set apart from the warmth of community. Meals are eaten alone. Laughter is distant. Companionship rare. For a repeat criminal, even when the body survives, the spirit suffers from hunger of another kind. Hunger for belonging, for acceptance, for the simple peace of being seen as human again. Breathe slowly now, and let yourself feel this weight. The psychology of living under suspicion is heavy, endless, wearing down even the strongest. To be a repeat criminal in the Middle Ages was not only to face ropes, irons, or exile. It was to carry an invisible chain, one wrapped around the mind, binding thought, shaping spirit, until suspicion itself became the air you breathed. The lives of repeat criminals in the Middle Ages rarely ended quietly. Suspicion and punishment followed them so closely that few escaped the final grasp of rope, blade, or fire. For some, death came swiftly in an ambush or skirmish. For others, it came after years of wandering, after countless accusations, after being dragged once more before a judge or a crowd. The endings were often harsh, but they were also expected. For those who bore the name of criminal all their lives, the end was rarely a surprise. Imagine a thief caught after years of evading capture. The guards lead him through the streets, the crowd gathering as always, their voices rising in familiar whispers. Some say they remember his first punishment decades ago. Others recall stories of thefts that may not have been his, but are tied to his name all the same. He walks slowly, not struggling, not shouting. His shoulders are bowed, his eyes fixed on the ground. For him, the ritual feels familiar, the ending already written long before. Close your eyes and picture the gallows at dawn. The rope sways lightly in the breeze. The wood creaks. The priest murmurs prayers. The man climbs the steps without resistance, as though he has walked this path many times in dreams. The crowd watches, but their judgment has dulled. They no longer see a man, but a story concluded, a pattern fulfilled. The rope tightens, the silence deepens, and with it, his life ends as it was always expected to. Others ended in exile, wandering far from home until hunger, cold, or illness claimed them. Their bodies were found on roadsides, in forests, in ditches, nameless and unmarked. The community whispered of their deaths, but only briefly. Without spectacle, without rope or fire, their endings faded quickly, their names dissolving into silence. They were remembered less as people and more as warnings, tales told in a single sentence. He died on the road, alone, as criminals do. Some became legends after death. A daring outlaw who evaded lords for years, stealing boldly and vanishing into forests, might be remembered as cunning, even admired. A woman accused of witchcraft, who spoke defiantly until flames consumed her, might be whispered about for generations, her memory half fear, half fascination. In these rare cases, the ending of a criminal's life grew larger than the life itself, reshaped into stories told long after their bones had turned to dust. But for most, the end was quiet in memory, if not in act. Their names slipped away, Their families bore the shame, and their lives became footnotes in parish records, or not recorded at all. The crowd remembered the punishment, the rope swaying, the fire burning, but not the person. The criminal's identity faded into the punishment itself, their story reduced to the echo of chains and the silence that followed. Imagine now the final thoughts of such a life. Sitting in a cell, cold stone beneath you, chains rattling faintly. You know the morning will bring judgment. You think of the years behind you, the thefts, the accusations, the running, the endless suspicion. You think of faces blurred by time, of places you can no longer name, of nights spent under stars or in dark cells. There is no surprise, only a weary acceptance. The path was long, but the end was always near. Breathe slowly and let yourself feel this stillness. For repeat criminals, the Middle Ages offered no escape from suspicion, no true freedom from the name they carried. Their endings were harsh, often public, sometimes forgotten, but always shaped by the shadow that followed them from first accusation to final breath. To live as a criminal, then, was to walk a path with only one conclusion, the weight of punishment pressing from beginning to end, until silence claimed what suspicion had begun. As we near the end of this long journey, it is time to step back and reflect on what it truly meant to be a criminal in the Middle Ages. We have wandered through prisons, through forests, through dungeons and courts. We have seen the chains, the ropes, the fire, and the endless suspicion. Yet behind each detail, behind each punishment, lies a deeper truth. To be a criminal then was not only to commit an act against law, but to exist outside the fragile fabric of order that bound medieval life together. Imagine again the village at dusk, the sky fading to grey, the fields silent, the church bell tolling softly in the distance. Life is hard, fragile, uncertain. Hunger is near, death is never far, sickness moves quickly. In such a world, order is everything. The rules of lord and priest are not simply guidelines. They are lifelines, holding society together, keeping fear at bay. To break them, or to be accused of breaking them, was to tear at the threads of that fabric. And for this, punishment came swiftly, not only to protect order, but to reassure those who remained within it. Close your eyes and think of how thin the line was. A loaf of bread stolen, and you became a thief. A word spoken carelessly against a priest, and you became a heretic. A misfortune that touched your neighbor could mark you as witch or cursed soul. Sometimes guilt was real, sometimes it was imagined, but always the label was heavy, shaping your life until the end. The experience of crime was more than act and punishment. It was hunger pressing you to steal. It was fear pressing neighbors to accuse. It was authority pressing judgment into your body with iron, with rope, with flame. For many, crime was less choice than consequence, born not of wickedness, but of survival, of desperation, of chance. And yet the law cared little for reasons. It cared only for the breaking of order, and for the restoration of it through spectacle and pain. Think of the stories we have passed through. The outlaw hiding in forests, hearing the howl of wolves and the approach of patrols. The prisoner chained in darkness, his body aching, his spirit fading. The heretic at the stake, flames rising as words of prayer mingled with smoke. The family left behind, bearing shame not their own, living in silence beneath the eyes of neighbors. These lives remind us that crime in the Middle Ages was not one story, but many, bound together by fear, by suffering, by memory that lasted long beyond the individual. Yet, even in darkness, there were moments of defiance, of resilience, a guard loosening a chain, a family enduring shame with quiet strength, an outlaw laughing around a fire, free for a brief moment beneath the stars. These small acts remind us that humanity persisted, even when crushed by law, even when silenced by rope, even when burned by fire. The spirit bent, but did not vanish. Breathe slowly, and let yourself feel this wider picture. To be a criminal in the Middle Ages was to live at the edge of society, to carry not only punishment but suspicion, to endure hunger, cold, fear, and shame. But it was also to remain human, with dreams, with fears, with moments of hope that flickered even in the darkest cells. The world called them villains, cursed, damned. Yet behind those names were men and women who breathed, who suffered, who lived and died as part of a world that judged them harshly, but could never erase their humanity completely. The memory of crime in the Middle Ages has never truly faded. Though centuries have passed, though the prisons have crumbled and the gallows have rotted, the echoes remain. The whispers of outlaws in forests, the cries of prisoners in dungeons, the silence of families marked by shame, all linger in stories, in legends, in the quiet spaces of history where suffering and humanity meet. Imagine yourself walking today through the ruins of an old castle. The stones are cold, the air heavy with age. You place your hand against a wall once darkened by smoke, once lit by torches. The chambers are empty now, but if you close your eyes, you can almost hear the faint clink of chains, the echo of footsteps, the murmur of prayers whispered by those awaiting judgment. The past feels near, as though the air itself remembers. Close your eyes and think of the forests where outlaws once hid. The trees are taller now, the paths overgrown, the animals free to roam without fear of snares. Yet still, you can picture the figures who once crouched in shadows, their eyes sharp, their breath held, their lives stretched thin between hunger and capture. The rustle of leaves feels like footsteps, the creak of branches like whispered voices. The forest, too, carries memory. Even in towns, the memory lingers. A square where merchants now sell goods may once have been the place where gallows stood, where crowds gathered to watch justice enacted. Children laugh, traders shout, life moves forward. But beneath the cobblestones lies the weight of history, the ground once stained by punishment, the air once filled with silence heavy enough to press into every heart. The stories of criminals in the Middle Ages survive not only in ruins and records, but in myths and legends. Robin Hood, The outlaw who defied lords and gave to the poor grew from tales told around fires, shaped by centuries of retelling. Witches, too, live on in folklore, their names twisted by fear and fascination alike. These legends soften the harshness of truth, yet behind them lie real people whose lives were not stories but struggles. Breathe slowly and let yourself feel the connection across time. The criminals of the Middle Ages may be long gone, but their experiences touch us still. They remind us of the fragility of justice, of the weight of fear, of the ease with which suspicion can become truth. They remind us that behind every punishment is a person, behind every legend is a life, behind every chain is a heart that once beat with hope. The memory also lingers in us because we seek meaning in suffering. We look back and wonder how people endured, how they survived chains, prisons, fire, and shame. We wonder what strength carried them, what moments of defiance lit their days, what small mercies softened their nights. Their stories whisper that even in the harshest times, humanity persists, fragile but unbroken, flickering like a flame that refuses to die. And so the echoes of medieval crime remain part of our imagination. When we walk in ruins, when we hear old legends, when we read forgotten names in records, we feel their presence, not as villains, not as strangers, but as human beings whose lives touched the same fears and hopes we know today. Their time is gone, but their voices linger, carried in history's breath, reminding us always of what it meant to live and die beneath the shadow of judgment. Now, as our long journey through the shadows of the Middle Ages comes to its end, let yourself settle deeper into calm. You have walked among outlaws in the forest. You have sat in dark cells. You have stood with crowds beneath gallows and fires. You have felt the weight of chains, the silence of shame, the whispers of superstition. And yet, here in this moment, you are safe, you are still, you are free to rest. Breathe slowly, deeply, and let your body soften. With each breath, the weight of these stories drifts away. The prisoners are gone, their chains long rusted. The guards have laid down their spears. The inquisitors no longer question. The crowds have dispersed, their whispers fading into silence. The fires are cold, the gallows empty, the forests quiet. What remains is only memory, and even memory now grows soft, dissolving like mist in morning light. Close your eyes and imagine the world around you fading. The stone walls of dungeons melt into shadow. The crackle of fire becomes only the faint sound of your own breath. The rattling of chains fades into stillness. The forest grows still, its leaves unmoving, its paths empty. One by one, each sound, each image slips away, leaving only quiet. You are no longer walking among criminals. You are no longer standing among crowds. You are only here, resting, safe, drifting. The stories you have heard tonight belong to another time. They belong to a world far behind us, a world of fear and faith, of hunger and survival, of justice both harsh and fragile. You do not need to carry them. You do not need to hold them. Let them pass through you. like wind through leaves, like water down a stream, leaving you lighter with each breath. Your body grows heavy now, sinking into the surface beneath you. Your shoulders loosen, your arms soften, your breath steadies. Each word is slower, softer, carrying you further into peace. The voices of the past grow faint, distant, like echoes across a wide valley. You need not follow them. You need only let them fade, until they are nothing more than a gentle hum, a lullaby of history that drifts you into sleep. If you are still awake, let yourself drift. If you are already drifting, let yourself go deeper. There is no need to return to the gallows, to the prisons, to the fears of another age. Stay here in stillness, in the safety of your own rest. The criminals of the Middle Ages have told their stories. Their time is done. Now it is your time to close your eyes, to let go, to sleep back. And before you drift completely, a soft reminder. If these stories have brought you calm, if they have eased your night, if you have found comfort in their gentle rhythm, please take a moment to like this video and to subscribe for more. It is a small kindness, but it helps me continue bringing you these quiet journeys, these whispered histories that soothe and still. Now breathe once more. Let go of the past. Let go of the present. Let go of every weight you carry. You are safe. You are calm. You are drifting. The world is quiet. The night is gentle. And sleep waits softly, ready to take you into its arms. Rest now, and let dreams carry you where stories fade, where silence heals, where peace surrounds you completely. Judgment in the Middle Ages was rarely an ending. It was the beginning of punishment, and punishment then was not meant only for the guilty. It was meant for everyone watching. To punish a criminal was to send a message, a warning, a reminder that law and order must be feared and obeyed. The sentence was not private. It was public, deliberate, and often designed to leave an image that lingered in memory. Imagine now that you have been found guilty. Perhaps it was theft, perhaps a fight, perhaps words spoken against someone of power. The Lord has given his ruling. The priest has nodded in approval, and the crowd has listened. You are led away once more, your chains clinking, your feet heavy on the stone floor. You know that what awaits is not only pain, but shame, for punishment was often designed to humiliate as much as to harm. For lesser crimes, the stocks awaited. Picture them standing in the middle of the square, a wooden frame with holes for hands and head. You are placed inside, the heavy beams clamping around you, leaving you trapped and bent forward, exposed to the stares of awe. The crowd gathers quickly. Children laugh, adults jeer. Some throw scraps of food or rotten vegetables. Hours stretch endlessly as you remain trapped, your neck aching, your arms numb, the shame heavier than the wood itself. For many, this was worse than the crime. To be mocked, spat upon, treated as less than human, was a wound that stayed long after the wood released you. Close your eyes and imagine the weight of that humiliation. The sun beating down, or the rain soaking your clothes. The faces of neighbors you once greeted, now twisted in laughter. Your body aches, but your mind aches more, knowing that in their eyes you are no longer one of them. You are the criminal, and this is the story they will tell long after you leave the stocks. Other punishments were harsher still. For theft, especially repeated theft, branding was common. A hot iron pressed to the skin, marking the body permanently. A thief's hand might be burned, or even cut off entirely, leaving no doubt for the rest of life. Imagine the searing heat, the sound of flesh sizzling, the permanent scar that says to everyone who sees you, this one has stolen. Punishment did not always end with the pain. It followed you, etched into your skin, into your body, into the way others looked at you forever. For more serious crimes, punishment could mean death, and death was rarely quiet. Hanging was the most common, a rope around the neck. A crowd gathered to watch as life ended slowly in the open air. For those who defied the church, burning was chosen instead, the flames rising as people prayed aloud, as though the fire was both justice and salvation. Each punishment was a lesson to those who watched. Do not follow this path. Do not defy the law. Do not challenge authority. Even lesser sentences carried weight. Fines could ruin a family. Exile could strip a person of home and community. Whipping could leave scars across the back for all to see. To be punished was to be marked, and the mark was never easily erased. Imagine again standing before the crowd. The stocks close around your neck. The iron hisses against your skin. The whip cracks in the air. You feel the eyes of dozens, perhaps hundreds, fixed on you. Their voices rise and fall, some mocking, some silent, some filled with fear that one day they might stand where you do now. You are the lesson, and in being punished, you are no longer only yourself. You are the warning carried into every corner of the town. Breathe slowly, and let yourself sink into that thought. In the Middle Ages, punishment was not hidden. It was not meant only for you. It was meant for everyone. To live as a criminal, then, was to live as example. To carry your fate not only in your body, but in the memory of all who saw it. And so you surrender again, because there is no escape, no mercy, no choice but to endure what comes. The punishments of the Middle Ages grew darker the more serious the crime was judged to be. Beyond the shame of the stocks, beyond the lash of the whip, there lay other punishments that sought not only to discipline the body, but to break the spirit. To be a criminal in those times was to stand always in fear of pain, for pain was considered the truest language of justice. Imagine now that your crime is judged not as petty, but as grave. Perhaps you have struck down another man. Perhaps you have spoken against the church. Perhaps you have stolen too often, or betrayed someone of power. The hall of judgment grows colder as the sentence is read, and you know that what awaits will not pass quickly. The dungeon is where many punishments began. Here, the darkness itself was a torment. Chains held prisoners in place, the iron biting against flesh, leaving bruises that never healed. The straw beneath them was foul, the air damp and filled with rot. Days became endless nights, broken only by the sound of dripping water or the cries of others in despair. The body weakened from hunger, from thirst, from the chill that crept into bones. The mind, too, began to fray, unraveling slowly in the monotony of suffering. Revert, there was worse. Torture was not uncommon, especially for those accused of heresy or treason. It was believed that pain could draw out the truth, that suffering could open the lips of the accused. The rack stretched the body until joints cracked, each turn of the wheel pulling limbs further apart. The strappado hoisted prisoners by their arms until shoulders tore, then dropped them suddenly, only to raise them again. Iron boots crushed the feet, while heated metal seared the skin. Each device was designed not only to wound, but to terrify, to remind all who heard of it that power was absolute, and that the body could be unmade as easily as clay. Close your eyes and imagine the silence before such torment began. The chamber is dim, lit by flickering torches. Chains hang from walls. Wooden beams creak above. The air smells of iron, of smoke, of fear itself. You stand there, weak, trembling, your breath shallow. Around you, men prepare the instruments, their faces calm, as though this is only another task in the rhythm of their days. Your heart beats heavy, your thoughts scatter, and in that moment you know you are no longer simply a person. You are an object of judgment, a vessel of pain. Executions, too, carried their own weight. Hanging was common, the rope tied swiftly, the body left to sway in the air until life was gone. For some, death came quickly. For others, it lingered. Minutes stretched into hours of gasping struggle. Burning was chosen for heretics, the flames rising as prayers were spoken aloud, the crowd murmuring with awe and fear. Decapitation, when it came, was reserved for nobles or those whose status granted a more honorable end. Yet even this was public. The swing of the blade witnessed by many, the finality of death a spectacle to be remembered. The purpose was not hidden. These punishments were warnings. To live as a criminal in the Middle Ages was not only to suffer your own fate, it was to become a lesson for all who saw. Each scream, each scar, each final breath reminded others of the price of defiance. Justice was not about balance. It was about fear, about obedience, about showing that no one stood above the law or the church. And yet, in the midst of all this, people still endured. Some confessed, some repented, some clung to silence. Some survived the dungeon, though broken, and walked again in the world with scars that never faded. Others met their end beneath the rope, or the fire, or the blade, their names remembered only as warnings. Breathe slowly now, and let yourself drift into the rhythm of this truth. The punishments of the Middle Ages were harsh, designed not to heal but to wound, not to redeem but to terrify. To be a criminal, then, was to live always with a shadow of pain hovering near, a shadow that followed into every corner of life, into every breath, into every dream. Punishment in the Middle Ages was rarely private. It was a performance, a ritual played out before the eyes of the people. To be punished was to become a lesson, a symbol, a story told in whispers long after the act was done. The pain mattered, but the memory mattered more, for it was the memory that kept others from following the same path. Imagine now a town square at dawn. The air is cool, mist rising from the cobblestones. Slowly, people gather, farmers leaving their fields, merchants pausing their trade, children tugging at their mothers' hands. They come not from cruelty, but from curiosity, from duty, from the knowledge that to witness justice was part of life. The square fills with voices, low at first, then louder as the crowd grows. Everyone knows that today someone will stand in the stocks, or face the whip, or meet a harsher end. You are brought forward, chains rattling at your wrists, guards flanking you on either side. The crowd turns to look, their voices dropping to murmurs. In that moment, you are no longer just yourself. You are the criminal, the center of attention, the one whose fate will remind them all of the power of the law. Faces blur together, dozens, perhaps hundreds, all watching, all waiting. For lighter punishments, the spectacle is quick. The stocks hold you fast, your body bent, your face exposed. The people approach, some with pity, others with scorn. Rotten fruit is thrown, insults shouted, laughter rising like smoke into the air. To stand there for hours is to feel the weight of humiliation heavier than any chain. The punishment does not break your bones, but it breaks your pride, leaving a wound that lingers even after you are free. Other punishments draw sharper gasps. The whip cracks, its sound sharp against the silence, followed by the cries of the condemned. Each strike leaves a mark, blood rising, skin breaking, the crowd wincing even as they cannot look away. Some whisper prayers, others turn their heads, but all remember the sight. The lesson is seared into them as surely as the lash is seared into flesh. And then there are executions, the grandest spectacles of all. The gallows stand tall, the rope swaying gently in the wind. The condemned is led forward, sometimes silent, sometimes shouting, sometimes praying aloud. The priest murmurs last rites. The crowd leans forward. The air grows still. Then the trapdoor falls, or the rope pulls tight, and the body jerks, suspended between life and death. Gasps ripple through the square, followed by silence, followed by murmurs that carry the story outward into the world. For heretics, the flames rise higher, crackling as they consume wood and cloth and flesh alike. Smoke drifts into the sky, carrying with it the whispers of prayers, the cries of the condemned, the smell of burning that clings to the air long after. The people watch with awe, with fear, with unease. They know the Church commands this, that faith demands obedience, that to question is to risk the same fate. The fire becomes more than punishment, it becomes warning, echoing into memory for years to come. Close your eyes and picture this gathering. The crowd pressed close, their breaths mingling, their voices low, their eyes fixed on the figure before them. You hear the sound of chains, the crack of a whip, the creak of a rope, the roar of flames. You smell smoke, sweat, damp earth. Every sense is filled with the presence of punishment. Every thought shaped by the reminder that crime carries cost. For the criminal, the punishment is the end. For the crowd, it is a beginning. They carry the memory with them, telling it in taverns, repeating it in homes, passing it down to children as caution. The criminal becomes story, the punishment becomes lesson, and the law becomes stronger through the retelling. Breathe slowly, and let yourself drift into the rhythm of this truth. Punishment in the Middle Ages was not only for the body, it was for the eyes of the living, the ears of the listening, the memories of all who watched. To be a criminal, then, was to be transformed into example, a role no one chose, but one that lived long after the punishment was done. Life as a criminal in the Middle Ages did not always end in the square, beneath the rope, or within the fire. For some, punishment was longer, slower, stretched across weeks or months, or even years. To be confined in a medieval prison was to be caught in a world that few escaped unchanged. It was not designed for comfort, or for reform, or for second chances. It was designed to hold, to break, to remind. Imagine yourself within those walls. The first thing you notice is the air. It is damp, heavy, filled with the smell of stones soaked in moisture, of bodies unwashed, of straw rotting beneath your weight. The space is small, perhaps barely large enough to stand and turn. The walls close in, rough to the touch, cold even when the air outside is warm. A narrow slit high above lets in a faint stream of light during the day. But it is never enough to chase away the gloom. The floor is uneven, strewn with straw, crawling with vermin that scurry and bite in the darkness. Your bed is nothing more than this straw, sometimes damp, sometimes alive with lice, sometimes gone entirely. Blankets, if they exist, are coarse and thin, leaving the body to shiver when the night air presses in through cracks in stone. To lie down is not to rest, but to surrender to discomfort, to accept that sleep will come only through exhaustion. Close your eyes and imagine the sounds that surround you, the drip of water echoing endlessly in the silence, the shuffle of chains as another prisoner moves, their cough carried through the air, the clang of iron as a guard passes, keys rattling at his side. Sometimes there are screams from deeper within the halls, cries that rise and fall, then fade into silence again. Each sound is part of the rhythm of prison, steady, heavy, unchanging. Food is meager, brought irregularly. A piece of bread, hard and stale. A bowl of broth, thin and tasteless, sometimes filled with more dirt than nourishment. Water is often brackish, leaving a metallic temps on the tongue. Hunger becomes constant, a dull ache that never fully leaves. The body grows weaker, the mind slower, until even chewing feels like labor. And yet, in this bleakness, time stretches endlessly. There is little to do but wait. Some prisoners whisper to each other in the dark, sharing scraps of stories, memories of the outside, prayers for mercy. Others fall silent, their voices gone, their eyes fixed on walls, as though staring long enough might open a door that is not there. Days blur into nights, and nights into days, until both feel the same, until you are no longer certain which one you live in. Sometimes, if the prison is beneath a castle, you hear faint sounds of life above, the clatter of hooves on cobblestones, the laughter of servants, the ring of bells calling people to prayer. Each sound is a reminder of a world still moving, a world you are no longer part of. For you, life is measured in breaths, in hunger, in silence. Imagine lying in that darkness, your body curled against the cold, your thoughts drifting. You remember the warmth of the sun, the softness of grass, the sound of voices greeting you by name. All of it feels distant now, as though it belonged to another person, another life. The prison takes not only your body, but your memory, dulling it, erasing the edges of who you once were. Breathe slowly, and let yourself feel the weight of this existence. To be a criminal in the Middle Ages was not always to face the rope, but sometimes to face the long erosion of time itself. Each day was punishment, each night a mirror of the one before, until the mind gave in, until the body grew frail, until the person who entered the cell was no longer the one who remained. Life inside the prison was not only about walls and chains. It was also about people guards, fellow prisoners, and sometimes priests who passed through the corridors. Each presence brought its own rhythm, its own small reminder that you were not entirely alone, though the comfort this offered was fragile at best. Imagine the guards first. Their footsteps echo down the stone halls, steady, heavy, unmistakable. The jangle of keys at their belts is a sound that prisoners come to know well, for it means food may arrive, or punishment, or simply the turning of locks to ensure no one has escaped. Some guards are indifferent, performing their duties with little thought. Others are cruel, taking pleasure in the fear of those behind the bars. A harsh word, a shove, a denial of food, these were tools as much as the chains themselves. Yet even in cruelty, there was routine, and routine gave a strange sense of order to the endless days. Now picture the other prisoners, your companions in misery. Some whisper quietly in the dark, sharing fragments of their stories. One speaks of theft, another of fighting, another of debts they could not repay. Their voices drift through the gloom like fading embers, sometimes strong, sometimes trailing into silence. Friendships form slowly, born of necessity rather than trust. A crust of bread passed between cells, a shared prayer in the dark, a quiet laugh at the expense of a guard. Small gestures, fragile but real, offered comfort against the weight of despair. Close your eyes and imagine the murmur of these voices around you. Some sharp with anger, others trembling with fear, others flat, emptied of hope. They blend together into a low hum, a constant presence in the darkness. It is not quite companionship, but it is not nothing either. It reminds you that you are not entirely forgotten, that others breathe and wait beside you. Priests, too, sometimes visited, bringing prayers and confessions. They would move from cell to cell, their words solemn, their voices echoing in the narrow space. Some prisoners clung to these visits, confessing sins, seeking forgiveness, whispering desperate pleas for mercy from heaven, if not from earth. Others turned away, bitter, silent, unmoved by words they believed empty. Yet even so, the presence of a priest reminded all of the weight of faith in those times, of the belief that punishment on earth was only a shadow of judgment beyond. The routines of prison life became their own form of punishment. The same thin meal at the same time, the same sound of keys turning, the same drip of water in the silence. Days melted into each other until the mind could no longer distinguish one from the next. Some prisoners found a strange comfort in this repetition, letting their thoughts drift until time lost all shape. Others fought against it, pacing their small cells, scratching marks into the stone, counting hours until the counting itself became madness. Prepanned, and still the body endured. Hunger gnawed but rarely killed outright. Cold pressed in but was tolerated. Sleep came in uneasy stretches, broken by noises and discomfort, but it still came. The human body, even in misery, clung to life, clung to breath, clung to the rhythm of existence. Imagine yourself now, lying on straw, your eyes half closed, listening to the quiet chorus around you. The guard's steps, the whisper of another prisoner's voice, the soft prayer of a priest in the distance, the ever-present dripping of water. These sounds blend together, not sharp, not urgent, but steady. They become the lull of your world, the rhythm of your captivity, the strange music of a life reduced to survival. Breathe slowly, deeply, and let yourself drift into that rhythm. In the Middle Ages, prison was not a place of reform or redemption. It was a place of waiting, of wearing down, of turning days into shadows. To live as a criminal there was to lose track of time, to surrender piece by piece, until the only thing left was the sound of your breath in the dark. The true weight of prison in the Middle Ages was not only in chains or cold or hunger. It was in the silence that pressed against the mind, the emptiness that stretched through endless days, the slow erosion of hope. The body could endure hunger. The body could endure cold. But the mind, trapped in darkness, grew restless, heavy, and fragile. Imagine yourself lying on the straw once more. The air is damp, the walls rough beneath your hands. You close your eyes, but the darkness there is no different than the darkness around you. You try to sleep, but sleep comes in fragments, broken, uneasy, filled with dreams that slip away as quickly as they form. When you wake, you cannot tell if minutes or hours have passed. Time loses shape. Morning and evening are no longer distinct. The world has narrowed to stone, straw, and the sound of your own breath. In such conditions, despair often grew. Some prisoners whispered prayers over and over, repeating the same words until they became like breath itself. Others sang softly or hummed, filling the silence with sound to remind themselves they were still alive. Some carved lines into the walls, counting days, until the marks grew so many that they blurred together, offering no real measure of time. Close your eyes and picture this endless waiting. You listen for footsteps, for the rattle of keys, for any sign of change. When nothing comes, you drift inward, into memory. You remember the warmth of the sun, the smell of bread baking, the laughter of voices in the market. These memories become dreams, and dreams become more real than the walls around you. In the prison, the past often felt closer than the present, a place to escape when reality became too heavy. Yet even in despair, the mind sought survival. Prisoners spoke to themselves, whispering questions, answering aloud. They created stories in their heads, weaving tales to pass the hours. Some clung to anger, replaying wrongs done to them, feeding themselves with fire. Others surrendered to numbness, letting their minds drift like leaves on water, detached, floating, waiting for whatever end would come. The dreams of prisoners were vivid, hunger-shaped visions of feasts, cold-shaped visions of fires, loneliness-shaped visions of family, of faces long unseen. Some believed these dreams were more than imagination, that they were signs, messages from God, promises of freedom beyond earthly walls. And in believing, they found comfort, a light flickering faintly in the endless dark. But not all endured. Some broke beneath the silence, their minds unraveling, their voices turning to cries or mutters that never ceased. The darkness pressed too heavily, the waiting stretched too long, and reason slipped away. For these, prison became more than punishment. It became dissolution, the slow loss of self, until nothing remained but shadows. Imagine yourself balanced between these states. You lie still, your body weak, your mind drifting between despair and memory, between dream and emptiness. You hear the faint whisper of another prisoner nearby, or perhaps only think you do. You breathe slow and shallow, each breath reminding you that you are still here, still alive, though the world has shrunk to almost nothing. Breathe slowly, deeply, and let yourself feel the rhythm of this existence. To be a criminal in the Middle Ages, kept in prison, was to live in a place where time dissolved, where hope faded, where the mind itself became both enemy and companion. Some endured, some did not, but all felt the same weight, pressing down, heavy, unyielding, timeless. And yet, even here, in this imagined darkness, you are safe. You are not truly bound, not truly chained. You drift only in thought, only in memory, only in story. As the night carries you onward, let the silence soften, let the walls fade, and let yourself rest, deeper and deeper in calm. Not every criminal of the Middle Ages ended up in a dungeon. Some were cast out instead, banished, declared outlaws. To be outlawed was to be cut away from the world you once knew, denied the protection of the law, and left to wander beyond the walls of town or village. You were neither alive in the eyes of society nor truly dead. You lived in a shadow state, where survival depended on cunning, on silence, and on never being seen. Imagine the moment of banishment. The judgment has been given, the priest's voice has faded, and the crowd disperses. You are led to the edge of the town. Perhaps your belongings are fewer, bundle of cloth, a crust of bread, nothing more. Beyond the gate stretches the forest, vast and dark. its shadows seeming to swallow the road. The guards release you, their hands cold, their eyes indifferent, and then you are alone. The gates close behind you. You are no longer part of the world within. The forest becomes your prison and your refuge. The trees tower high, their branches blocking the sun, their roots twisting across the path. The ground is damp, covered with leaves that crunch beneath your steps. Birds call in the distance. Owls cry at night. Wolves howl beneath the moon. Every sound is sharper, heavier, when you know you are without protection. Each rustle could be prey or danger. Close your eyes and imagine the silence of that exile. The air smells of moss, of damp earth, of smoke from distant hearths you can no longer approach. You walk with caution, always alert, always listening. Hunger presses quickly, for food is not given here. You search for berries, for roots, for streams where fish might hide. Each meal is uncertain, each day a question of whether your body will endure. Shelter is no easier. Perhaps you find a cave, cold and damp, with walls that echo your breath. Perhaps you build a hut of branches and leaves, fragile against the rain, fragile against the wind. At night you curl into yourself, the blanket of darkness heavy, the sounds of animals pressing close. Sleep comes, but it is uneasy, broken by fear of discovery, by hunger twisting your stomach, by the thought that at any moment a patrol might find you. For to be outlawed was not only to be cast out, it was to be hunted. Anyone who found you could harm you without consequence. Your life was no longer protected by law. You became less than a citizen, less than a neighbor, less than human in the eyes of authority. To meet another person on the road was to meet danger, for their hands might reach for your bundle, their voice might call for guards, their knife might strike. And yet some found a strange freedom in this life. No rules, no duties, no demands of lord or priest. Only the forest, only survival, only the rhythm of nature itself. Outlaws sometimes banded together, forming groups that lived on the edges of society, raiding travelers, taking food where they could find it, carving out a fragile existence in the spaces between worlds. They were feared, but they were also sometimes admired, spoken of in stories as rebels who defied the harshness of law. Imagine yourself now, sitting beneath a tree, your back against the rough bark, the forest dark around you. A fire flickers at your feet, small and weak, its smoke curling upward. You chew a piece of bread, hard and stale, stretching it as far as you can. Your eyes flicker to every shadow, your ears prick at every sound. You are alive, but every breath feels borrowed, every hour stolen from the law that cast you out. Breathe slowly, deeply, and let yourself drift into this exile. To be an outlaw in the Middle Ages was to live always at the edge, always in fear, always uncertain of tomorrow. Yet it was also to live with a strange kind of freedom, far from the walls, far from the chains, far from the reach of the crowd. You exist in between, neither inside nor outside, neither safe nor condemned, a shadow moving through the endless dark. The life of an outlaw was a life of constant struggle. Every day was a test of whether hunger, cold, or fear would win. The walls of a prison were absent, but the forest, the roads, and the open fields became another kind of cage, one without locks, but filled with dangers at every turn. Pigeon waking in the woods, your body stiff from sleeping on damp earth, your stomach hollow from lack of food. The fire you lit the night before has burned out, leaving only cold ashes, grey and lifeless. Around you, the forest is alive with sound-birds calling, leaves rustling in the wind, distant howls echoing through the trees. You rise slowly, your clothes damp with dew, your breath misting in the morning air. Another day begins, and survival is the only task. Food is always the first need. Sometimes you find berries, small and tart, staining your fingers as you eat. Sometimes you catch sight of a rabbit darting through the undergrowth, quick and clever, often faster than your hand or snare. If luck favors you, you catch one, and the meat gives you strength for another day. More often, luck does not favor you, and you chew only roots, bitter and tough, or stale bread stolen long ago. Hunger gnaws at you, steady, relentless, shaping every thought, every choice. Water is another task. Streams wind through the forest, clear and cold, their sound soft against the silence of the trees. You kneel to drink, the taste sharp, the cold biting your teeth. Sometimes the water carries silt, sometimes sickness, but you drink anyway, for thirst is merciless. Each sip is both relief and risk, a reminder that even the simplest need is never certain. Shelter is fragile. A cave offers stone walls, but damp seeps in, chilling your bones. A hut of branches shields you from rain, but not from cold, not from wind. In winter, the forest is merciless. Snow covers the ground, firewood is scarce, and the cold creeps into every limb. You curl into yourself, shivering, praying for dawn to bring warmth that never truly comes. In summer, storms roll through suddenly, rain pounding down, soaking clothes, flooding shelters, leaving you trembling in the dark. Close your eyes and imagine this rhythm. Each day blends into the next, each choice the same. Food, water, shelter, safety. The life of an outlaw is not filled with daring adventures or heroic deeds, as some stories tell. It is filled with hunger, with fear, with loneliness. The body weakens slowly, the mind dulls, the spirit flickers like a candle in the wind. Yet even so, outlaws were not always alone. Sometimes they found one another in the forest, drawn together by shared exile, by the knowledge that survival is easier with more than one. Around small fires, they whispered their stories of theft, of quarrels, of accusations that drove them from home. They shared scraps of food, guarded each other as they slept, stood together against travelers or soldiers. These bands of the unwanted became families of a kind, fragile, bound not by love but by need. But trust was rare. Betrayal was always near, for one outlaw could sell another for a pardon, or for a handful of coins. Suspicion lingered in every glance, every silence, every movement in the night. Even in company, the outlaw was never safe, never fully at ease. Companionship was comfort, but it was also risk. Imagine yourself now, sitting by a small fire in the forest. Around you sit others, their faces shadowed, their voices low. One sharpens a blade, another tears bread into pieces, another stares into the flames in silence. The fire crackles softly, the night presses in, the forest alive with distant sounds. You feel both safer and more afraid than when you were alone. You are part of a fragile circle, a gathering of shadows, bound together only by need. Breathe slowly, deeply, and let yourself drift into this world. To be an outlaw in the Middle Ages was to live on the edge of survival, to face hunger and cold each day, to trust no one fully, to belong nowhere. It was a life of shadows, of whispers, of endless vigilance, where freedom and fear walked always side by side. The life of an outlaw was never free from fear. Every step through the forest, every rustle of leaves, every flicker of movement in the shadows might mean discovery. To be cast out was not only to lose a home, but to gain a sentence that followed you wherever you went. For an outlaw, capture was always possible, and the thought of it never left the mind. Imagine walking along a narrow path at dusk. The trees rise tall on either side, their branches arching overhead like a roof of shadows. The light is fading, the air cool, the forest hushed. Each footstep is careful, every sound sharp. A broken twig behind you might be only the wind, or it might be a soldier, or a villager, or another outlaw waiting to strike. You glance back often, your heart quickening, your breath shallow. Even in silence, you are never at peace. Betrayal is another fear. Outlaws who gathered together shared food, fire, and watch, but trust was fragile. One man's promise could turn to treachery if a pardon was offered, if the lure of coin proved stronger than loyalty. To be betrayed was not rare. Many outlaws found themselves captured not by strangers, but by companions. Imagine the sting of that moment, the sound of chains once more, the smirk of a former ally, the weight of knowing you were traded away like stolen goods. The forests themselves carried danger. Wolves prowled, hungry and cunning. Bandits roamed, not unlike yourself, willing to take from anyone weaker. Soldiers patrolled, hunting those cast out, bringing them back in chains. Hunger and cold pressed daily, but fear pressed deeper, sharper, unrelenting. Each night by the fire was lit not for comfort, but for survival. The flames kept the wild at bay, but the glow might also reveal your hiding place. The choice was always the same, darkness or danger. Close your eyes and feel the tension of this existence. Sleep is never full, never safe. You lie curled near the embers, a knife within reach, your ears pricked at every sound. Dreams are short, scattered, broken by the crack of a branch, the howl of wolves, the rustle of wind through the leaves. You never wake rested. You wake alert, tense, heart pounding before you even open your eyes. Stories of outlaws often became legend. Some were romanticized figures who defied lords, who gave to the poor, who mocked authority from the shadows. But behind the stories lay the reality: hunger, cold, fear, betrayal. Few lived long. Most were captured, dragged back to towns where punishment awaited. The rope, the fire, the sword, these were the ends of outlaw lives. And the stories told afterward served not as glory, but as warning. Imagine now the moment of capture. A sudden shout in the night, the rush of boots on the forest floor. Hands seize you, ropes tighten. The firelight flickers on iron helmets. Your body struggles, but hunger has weakened you. Fear slows you, and the hands are too many. You are dragged once more through the woods, back toward the walls that cast you out. The forest fades, the gates open, the crowd gathers. You are outlaw no longer. You are prisoner again. Breathe slowly, and let yourself feel the rhythm of this cycle. Outlaws lived always between two worlds, free in the forest, yet bound by fear, hunted, never at rest. Some escaped for years, slipping through shadows, vanishing into hills and woods. Others lasted only weeks before the rope claimed them. But all shared the same truth. To live beyond the law in the Middle Ages was not freedom. It was survival stretched thin, a fragile life always at the edge of capture. Now, as you drift further into calm, imagine that tension softening, fading into nothing. The rustle of leaves grows quiet. The sound of pursuit falls away. The fire burns low, steady, safe. For here, in this moment, you are not hunted, not betrayed, not bound. You are only listening, only drifting, carried by story into stillness, into rest, into sleep. To be called a criminal in the Middle Ages did not always mean the same thing. The word stretched across many acts, some small, some grave, some born of desperation, others of belief. The law was strict, and the reach of the church was wide. What we might see as survival, or freedom of thought, or even chance, could be judged then as crime. And each kind of crime carried its own shadow, its own weight, its own punishment. Imagine first the thief. Theft was among the most common accusations. Hunger drove many to it, for food was scarce, and coin scarce still. To steal a loaf of bread, a chicken, or a few coins could mean the difference between life and starvation. But the law did not ask for reasons. A thief, whether taking out of hunger or out of greed, bore the same name: criminal. Some were punished with the stocks, some with branding, some with harsher ends. Yet behind each theft was often a story not of wickedness, but of emptiness, of need pressing too sharply against the body. Then there was poaching. The forests, though vast, belonged to lords and kings. To take a rabbit, a deer, or even a fallen branch of wood was to trespass upon their power. Imagine creeping through the trees at night, a snare in your hand, your eyes sharp for movement. You hear the snap of a twig, the rush of hooves, the sudden strike of luck. But if caught, punishment was swift and harsh. The forest that once gave life became a place of danger, where every rustle might carry death. Close your eyes and think of this, how even survival could be judged a crime. A man who fed his family with the forest's bounty might be hailed in secret by neighbors, yet condemned in public as outlaw. The boundary between right and wrong was not drawn by hunger or fairness, but by law, by power, by those who ruled. Heresy was another crime, more dangerous still. To speak against the church, to question its authority, to hold beliefs deemed unholy. These acts were feared not only for what they said, but for what they might spread. The church ruled not only bodies, but souls, and heresy threatened both. To be accused was to stand not only before men, but before faith itself. Punishment was rarely light: torture, burning, the slow unraveling of life. These were the tools used to stamp out heresy, to remind all that the soul must not wander. And then there was witchcraft, the shadow that fell especially upon women. To heal with herbs, to speak of visions, to live apart, or simply to be disliked any. Of these could bring whispers of which the fear was not of crime in the earthly sense, but of communion with forces unseen, with powers forbidden. Imagine being called such a name, neighbors pointing, children staring, whispers gathering like smoke. Once the word was spoken, it was difficult to escape. Trials often sought proof where none could exist, and the accused found themselves bound not only in chains, but in suspicion, in fear, in the weight of superstition. Murder, too, was judged harshly, though it carried more structure. To kill was to break not only law, but order itself. Yet not all killings were equal. A noble killing a peasant might find mercy, where the reverse found none. Bloodlines and rank shaped justice as much as guilt or innocence. And still, the punishment was final. The rope, the blade, the fire, waiting to claim those judged guilty. Imagine standing accused of any of these crimes. Your heart races, your voice trembles, but the crowd is already turning, already whispering, already certain. In the Middle Ages, accusation was often enough. Proof was fragile, and mercy rare. The law and the church spoke with authority, and the people listened. Breathe slowly now, and let yourself feel the weight of these names: thief, poacher, heretic, witch, murderer. Each one carried a different fate, a different path into punishment, but all shared the same truth. To bear the name of criminal was to be marked, to be separated, to be bound by chains not only of iron but of judgment, of fear, of memory. The fear of heresy and witchcraft in the Middle Ages was heavier than any chain. To be called a thief or a poacher was to break the law of men. To be called a heretic or a witch was to break the law of God, or so people believed. And in a world where faith shaped every hour of the day, such accusations cut deeper than hunger or theft. They reached into the soul. Imagine a village where whispers begin. Perhaps someone speaks too freely, questioning a priest's words. Perhaps someone dreams aloud of visions, or practices remedies with herbs. Perhaps a woman lives alone, her home filled with plants, her voice quiet, her habits different. These small things, innocent to our eyes, became sparks for suspicion. And once the spark caught, It spread quickly, fanned by fear, by envy, by the need to explain misfortune. The harvest fails, was it the curse of a witch? A cow sickens, was it poisoned by someone in secret? A storm destroys fields, was it called down by a heretic's prayers? The world was fragile, ruled by forces unseen, and when disaster came, people searched for reasons. Too often, the reason became the neighbor, the healer, the stranger, the one already set apart. Close your eyes and imagine the feeling of being accused in such a world. You wake to find neighbors at your door, their voices sharp, their eyes fearful. They say you have spoken words against the church. They say your herbs are spells, your remedies are curses. They say your silence is proof of guilt. You try to explain, but words do not matter. The suspicion has already taken root. To them, the truth is no longer in your hands. It is in the hands of priests, of judges, of the crowd that gathers with every whisper. Trials for heresy and witchcraft were often less about proof than about performance. A priest asked questions you could not answer without danger. If you confessed, you admitted guilt. If you denied, they said the devil guided your tongue. Sometimes ordeals were used plunging a hand into boiling water, walking across burning iron, being thrown into water to see if you sank or floated. Each test was said to reveal God's judgment, but in truth, each left you marked, burned, scarred, or drowned. The punishments were among the harshest. For heretics, the fire was common, the flames rising as prayers were chanted, the crowd murmuring with awe and fear. For witches, too, the stake often awaited, the belief that fire cleansed not only the body but the soul. Imagine standing bound to wood, the air filled with smoke, the faces of the crowd blurred through the haze. Your voice is lost in the crackle of flames, your life ending as others watch in silence. The fear was not only for those accused, it was for everyone. Each person knew that one word spoken carelessly, one enemy too eager, one misfortune too near, could place them in the same position. Suspicion spread like smoke, and no one was immune. Even the most faithful could find themselves accused, for faith itself was twisted into weapon when fear took hold. And yet, even in this shadow, there were those who resisted. Some villagers protected neighbors, refusing to believe the whispers. Some priests counseled mercy, though their voices were often drowned by louder demands for punishment. Some accused clung to faith, praying as flames rose, declaring their innocence until the very end. Their words, though silenced, lingered in memory, carried as whispers of injustice. Breathe slowly and imagine the weight of living in such a world. Every word you spoke, every glance you gave, every act you performed might be twisted into evidence. To be accused was to lose control, to be carried into a tide of fear you could not escape. The chains of suspicion were stronger than iron, for they bound not only the body but the soul. And once they closed around you, few ever broke free. Among the many crimes of the Middle Ages, murder stood apart. To take a life was to break not only the law of man, but the order of society itself. Yet even in this, justice was not equal. The weight of judgment depended not only on the act, but on who committed it, and against whom it was committed. Imagine a quarrel between two peasants in the fields. Harsh words grow into shouts, shouts into fists, fists into the sudden flash of a blade. One falls, blood darkening the soil, breaths slipping away. The other is seized, dragged before the village, accused of murder. The trial is swift, the judgment harsher still. For a peasant, there is little protection, little room for defense. Punishment may be death, or mutilation, or exile. The crime is seen as disruption, as danger, as proof of unruly nature. Now imagine the same quarrel, but with a noble and a peasant. If the noble strikes and the peasant dies, the outcome is different. The noble may face a fine, a brief confinement, or even only the weight of confession. His rank shields him. His name softens the blow of justice. The peasant's life is counted, but it is counted as less. The scales of judgment tilt heavily, not by fairness, but by power. Close your eyes and feel the imbalance of such a world. Life was precious, but not equal. The death of one man could echo loudly, bringing punishment swift and fierce, while the death of another might pass with little notice. In the Middle Ages, justice bent beneath the weight of rank, and those at the bottom bore the harshest blows. Murder within families carried its own weight. To kill a spouse, a parent, or a child was judged not only as crime, but as sin against nature itself. The punishments were brutal, meant to erase the stain of such betrayal. Yet even here, mercy was not always absent. Some confessed, begged forgiveness, and were granted quick deaths rather than long tortures. Others were shown no such kindness, their ends drawn out as examples to all who might think of raising a hand against blood. There were also killings deemed lawful war above all. A knight striking down dozens in battle was praised, rewarded, honored. Yet the same hand, turned against his own people, became criminal. The line was thin, drawn not by the act of killing, but by the authority behind it. Murder was crime only when it broke the order, not when it served it. The poor felt this most deeply. A fight in a tavern, a theft turned violent, a desperate act of defense each could end in death, and each brought punishment swift and merciless. There were no long trials, no careful weighing of causes. The crowd gathered, the Lord spoke, the rope waited. In a world where life was already fragile, death through crime was both common and feared. And yet some murders became stories, tales of betrayal, of vengeance, of passion, spread through towns and villages. The condemned became warnings, their names spoken with pity or scorn, remembered less as people than as examples. Their lives shrank to a single act, their deaths told again and again as lessons. Breathe slowly, and let yourself imagine the weight of such a world. To live in the Middle Ages was to live always within reach of violence, and always beneath the uneven scales of justice. To be accused of murder was to be marked beyond return, unless rank or coin could shield you. For the poor, the end was certain. For the powerful, the law bent like a reed in the wind. The rope, the blade, the fire all waited, but they did not wait equally. Justice was not blind. It saw clearly who you were, and judged you by it. And so the shadow of crime stretched longer for some, shorter for others, but it always hung above, a reminder that life could be taken not only by the hand of man, but by the hand of the law itself. Executions in the Middle Ages were not hidden. They were not quiet, private endings. They were rituals, spectacles, woven into the life of towns and villages. To punish a criminal with death was to deliver a message not just to the guilty, but to everyone watching. And so communities gathered, drawn by duty, by fear, by curiosity, to witness the final act of justice. Imagine the morning of such a day. The air is cool, heavy with expectation. A wooden platform has been built in the square, or gallows raised just outside the town walls. The crowd begins to gather slowly, farmers leaving fields, merchants pausing trade, children tugging at their parents' hands. Voices rise in low murmurs, carrying rumors of the condemned, retelling stories of the crime, speculating on how the end will come. There is a sense of unease, yet also of inevitability. The condemned is brought forward, escorted by guards, chains clinking with every step. Perhaps they are silent, their face pale and drawn. Perhaps they shout, defiant until the last. Perhaps they pray aloud, words trembling as they ask for mercy beyond what this world offers. Every movement is watched, every sound heard. The condemned has become more than a person. They are a symbol, their body carrying the weight of judgment for all to see. Close your eyes and imagine standing in that crowd. You hear the shuffle of feet on cobblestones, the jangle of iron, the low gasp as the condemned appears. The air feels still, heavy, as though the world itself holds its breath. You are not only witness, you are participant, part of the ritual, part of the audience that gives the punishment meaning. Executions were many in form. Hanging was the most common, the rope tied swiftly, the body left to sway in the air until life slipped away. The crowd watched the final struggle, the gasps, the silence that followed. For those of higher status, beheading was chosen instead, a sword or axe falling in a single stroke if fortune was kind, in several if not. Burning was reserved for crimes against faith heresy, witchcraft, sins thought to stain the soul. Flames rose high, smoke curling into the sky. Prayers murmured, as though fire could cleanse as well as consume. Each method carried not only pain, but spectacle. The rope creaked, the blade flashed, the fire roared. The crowd reacted gasping, murmuring, sometimes even cheering. Children stared wide-eyed. Adults crossed themselves. Priests raised their voices in prayer. The condemned, in that moment, was both feared and pitied, hated and remembered. The ritual often began with words. The crime was read aloud, the punishment declared. Priests offered confession, urging repentance, offering the hope of salvation even as earthly life ended. Some criminals confessed, their voices shaking, their eyes lifted skyward. Others denied until the end, their words swallowed by the crowd. Either way, The ritual continued, moving steadily toward its conclusion. And when the end came, it was not only death, it was release. The crowd exhaled as the body fell, as the fire consumed, as silence settled. The tension broke, and the lesson was clear. Crime had been answered, order had been restored. Life returned to its rhythm, but the memory lingered, a shadow carried in whispers and warnings. Breathe slowly, and let yourself feel the weight of such a moment. The execution was more than punishment. It was theater, ritual, lesson. It shaped the fears of the people. It reinforced the power of the law. It turned one life into a story that echoed beyond the square. For the condemned, it was the end. For the crowd, it was a reminder that all lived beneath the same shadow, and that any step beyond the law could lead to the same fate. For the condemned, an execution was the end. But for the crowd, it was an experience, one that touched every sense and every emotion. The act of witnessing was as important as the act of punishing. The community gathered not only to see justice, but to feel it, to carry it with them, to let it shape the stories they told long after. Imagine yourself in that crowd once more. The square is filled, the air thick with murmurs. Children sit on their parents' shoulders, their eyes wide with a mix of fear and curiosity. Merchants pause their selling, farmers rest their tools, servants slip away from duties. No one wishes to miss the moment, for it is said that to see justice done is to be reminded of the order that binds all lives together. As the condemned steps forward, the crowd falls silent. You hear the faint rattle of chains, the creak of wood beneath boots, the low voice of a priest offering last words. The silence is heavy, expectant, almost reverent. Everyone is drawn into the moment, their breath held, their eyes fixed. Even those who hate the condemned feel a stirring of pity. Even those who pity them feel the weight of fear. The line between emotions blurs, leaving only the shared awareness that this moment matters. Close your eyes and picture the faces around you. Some whisper prayers, their lips moving silently. Others frown, their brows heavy with judgment. A few smirk or laugh quietly, finding grim satisfaction in another's downfall. Yet all watch, all feel, all remember. The execution is no longer about the individual who stands accused. It is about the community itself, reaffirming its strength, its order, its unity. When the act itself begins, reactions ripple through the crowd. At the drop of a body from the gallows, gasps rise, then fall into uneasy silence. At the flash of a blade, some flinch, some turn their heads, some lean forward to see more clearly. At the roar of flames, people murmur prayers, their faces lit by fire, their eyes wide with both horror and awe. Each sound, each movement, each detail presses itself into memory. The senses are filled. The smell of smoke, of burning wood, sometimes of burning flesh. The sound of creaking ropes, of crackling fire, of murmured voices. The sight of the condemned, struggling or still, flames rising or ropes tightening. The touch of the crowd pressing close, shoulders against shoulders, bodies swaying together. It is an experience not of one person alone, but of many, bound together by what they see, what they hear, what they feel. Afterward, the crowd does not disperse quickly. People linger, speaking in low tones, retelling what they saw, shaping the story already into something larger. Children ask questions. Adults give answers shaded by their own beliefs. Some call it justice, others call it cruel, but all agree it was necessary, a reminder that law is strong and must be obeyed. The condemned becomes less than a person and more than one. They become a tale. Do you remember when the thief was hanged? Do you recall the heretic who burned? Their names fade, but their punishments remain, retold in taverns, whispered in fields, carried into the future as warnings. The spectacle of execution transforms the individual into symbol, and the crowd ensures the symbol endures. Breathe slowly, deeply, and let yourself feel the rhythm of this. The crowd gathers, the silence holds, the act unfolds, the memory lingers. Execution in the Middle Ages was more than an ending. It was a mirror held before the people, reflecting their fears, their faith, their obedience. To watch was to be reminded of your own place, your own vulnerability, your own submission to the law that ruled over all. The execution itself ended with silence, with smoke fading into the sky, with ropes swaying gently in the air. But the story did not end there. In the Middle Ages, the death of a criminal was never only about the moment. It was about the memory that followed, the way the tale of punishment spread, reshaped, and lingered for years, for generations, carried in whispers and warnings. Imagine the town after such a day. The crowd slowly disperses, their voices hushed at first, then rising as distance grows. Some speak with awe, repeating every detail. Others speak with unease, their faces pale, their words soft. Children ask questions. Parents answer with stern warnings. The event becomes conversation, not just once, but again and again, until it settles into the shared memory of the place. Close your eyes and picture this ripple of stories spreading. In taverns, men retell the sight of the gallows, the sound of the rope creaking. In homes, families speak of the fire, the way flames curled upward as prayers were whispered. In fields, workers repeat the lesson, obey or risk the same fate. Each retelling changes the details slightly, but the core remains. The same crime was punished, order restored. Over time, the names of the condemned often fade. Few remember exactly who they were, what family they came from, what life they lived before. Instead, they become the thief who was hanged, the heretic who burned, the murderer who lost his head. The punishment eclipses the person, leaving only a shadow, a warning. The individual disappears, but the story endures. Sometimes, though, memory twists further. Certain criminals become legends. A thief who defied capture for months might be remembered as cunning, almost heroic, even as his death was grim. A heretic who spoke boldly until the flames consumed him might be recalled not as villain but as martyr. Though the church forbade such thoughts, The line between criminal and folk hero blurred in stories whispered carefully, told when authority could not hear. Imagine sitting by a hearth at night, the fire crackling, voices low. A father tells his children of the outlaw who stole from lords and fed the poor, a man who lived in the forest until the rope found him. The story is both warning and fascination, reminding the children of danger, yet filling their minds with images of freedom, of defiance. In this way, even those condemned lived on, reshaped into figures larger than themselves. The memory of executions also deepened fear. People who had seen flames rise or ropes tighten carried those images with them into dreams, into prayers, into daily life. The gallows standing outside town became a constant reminder, its presence heavy even when empty. The square where blood was spilled seemed marked, the air different, the ground touched by what had occurred. Justice was not only in law but in landscape, etched into the places where punishment unfolded. And so, to be a criminal in the Middle Ages was to become part of memory, willingly or not. Your life shrank to a story told by others, your death repeated as lesson or legend. You are not only punished in body but in time, carried forward in whispers long after the smoke cleared, long after the rope rotted, long after your name was gone. Breathe slowly, deeply, and let yourself drift into this thought. Justice, then, was not only the act, but the echo. Each execution was a ripple in the water of memory, spreading outward, touching every life, shaping every thought. To live as a criminal was to know that even in death, your story would not be yours alone. It would belong to the crowd, to the whispers, to the centuries. And even now, as you listen, you are part of that echo, part of the memory that still drifts through time. Behind every accusation, every prison, every punishment in the Middle Ages stood figures of authority. Guards, sheriffs, bailiffs, inquisitors. Their presence shaped the fate of criminals, and their duty was to uphold the order of the time. To be a criminal was not only to face chains or crowds, but to live under the gaze of these men, to feel their hands, to hear their voices, to know that they carried the power of law and church alike. Imagine first the town guard. Their boots strike cobblestones with steady rhythm, their eyes scanning the market, their hands resting on spears or swords. They are not always noble or disciplined. Many are poor men themselves, given authority through uniform and weapon. Yet their presence is enough to remind others of the rules. For a criminal, their footsteps are a sound of dread. The moment they turn toward you, suspicion becomes reality. Their hands are rough, their grip firm, their judgment swift. Sheriffs and bailiffs held wider power. They were agents of the Lord, tasked with collecting dues, enforcing rules, and hunting down those who broke them. To hear their knock on your door was to feel fear coil in your chest, for it meant debt or accusation, punishment or exile. Imagine them entering a cottage, their voices stern, their eyes cold, their words heavy with authority. A fine could ruin a family. A single accusation could end a life. They carried not only weapons, but the law itself. and to resist them was to resist the power of the land. Then there were inquisitors, men of the church, whose duty was to root out heresy. Their presence was different, heavier, for they spoke not only of law, but of salvation, of sin, of the eternal fate of the soul. Imagine the weight of their questions, calm but sharp, pressing into your heart, turning every word into evidence. Their chambers smelled of incense and wax. Their robes marked them as servants of God. Their voices carried the authority of heaven and hell. To stand before them was to stand in shadow, uncertain whether your fate lay in prison, in flame, or in absolution that never quite erased suspicion. Close your eyes and picture the feeling of being under their gaze. The guards with their rough hands, the sheriffs with their sharp voices, the inquisitors with their piercing questions. Each one different, yet each one holding your fate as though it were nothing more than parchment in their hands. You are reduced to words spoken about you, to gestures they interpret, to rules they enforce without hesitation. Yet these men were human too. Some were cruel, eager to show their power, taking pride in fear. Others were weary, their tasks heavy, their hearts dulled by repetition. Some showed moments of mercy, loosening a chain, offering an extra crust of bread, looking away when they might have accused. For a criminal, the difference between cruelty and mercy often lay not in law, but in the character of the man who stood before you. Imagine yourself in a dungeon once more. The guard passes, his lantern flickering against stone walls. His eyes meet yours, unreadable, his keys jangling softly at his side. You do not know if he will speak or strike or simply walk past. Every step, every gesture holds your fate in small ways. The power of these men was not abstract. It was immediate, tangible, written into the rhythm of your days and nights. Breathe slowly now, and let yourself feel this balance. The law in the Middle Ages was not a faceless thing. It had faces, voices, footsteps, hands. To be a criminal was to know those faces well, to fear their approach, to wait for their judgment, to see mercy or cruelty reflected in their eyes. They were the line between freedom and chains, between life and death, between being forgotten and being remembered only as an example. The men who enforced the law in the Middle Ages lived strange lives of their own. They were feared, sometimes respected, often resented. For criminals, they were both flesh and symbol, men of ordinary breath and heartbeat, yet cloaked in the power of authority. To see them was to see not only a face, but the weight of rule pressing down. Imagine a guard at the edge of a village. His tunic is worn, his boots muddied, his spear leaning against the wall. He yawns in the early morning, rubbing cold from his hands. He is not a lord, not a knight, but still his presence marks him as someone apart. When he walks through the market, people step aside. When he stops before a store, the merchant grows uneasy. His authority comes not from himself alone, but from the system behind him, from the Lord's will, from the Lord's shadow. For criminals, this duality was unsettling. You might see him laugh with friends, drink ale, stumble through a song in the tavern. Yet the same man could drag you by chains the next day, indifferent to your pleas, deaf to your excuses. He was both ordinary and extraordinary, human in weakness, unyielding in duty. To be judged by such a man was to feel the thinness of the barrier between mercy and cruelty. Close your eyes and picture the sheriff or bailiff. His horse moves slowly along a muddy road, hooves splashing through puddles. He carries a ledger of debts, names written in ink that determines who pays and who suffers. His eyes scan cottages, his voice rings out names, his hand extends for coin. To the villagers he is dreaded, for a fine could empty cupboards, and refusal could mean punishment. Yet at night he too returns home, removes his boots, sits by the fire, sighs with the weight of his duties. Criminals saw this contradiction clearly. The same man who broke their lives also lived a life of his own, shaped by duty, softened by fatigue. And then the Inquisitor, cloaked in robes, holding parchment marked with seals. His presence filled rooms with silence. His questions probed deeply, calm yet sharp, his gaze unflinching. He was more than human in the eyes of many, seen as instrument of God, as voice of heaven's will. Yet behind the robe was a man of flesh, eating bread, drinking wine, weary from travel. Some criminals whispered that inquisitors doubted in private, that their voices trembled in prayer, that they, too, felt the burden of judgment. But no one dared speak such thoughts aloud. For those accused, these enforcers became more than individuals. They became part of the world's structure, unavoidable as rain, immovable as stone. You could plead, argue, shout, but the guard still held the keys. The sheriff still demanded payment. The Inquisitor still wrote your fate into his ledger. To be criminal was to stand always beneath their shadow, uncertain whether they would bring pain or silence, or the smallest gesture of kindness. Imagine yourself once more in a narrow cell. A guard passes, his lantern glowing faintly, his face half in shadow. He pauses, looks at you, then continues without a word. You wonder what he thinks. Does he see you as villains, as sinner, or only as task, as name on parchment? The silence holds no answer, only the rattle of his keys fading down the corridor. Breathe slowly, deeply, and let yourself feel the strange closeness of these men. They were not distant figures of legend, but immediate presences, tired, human, yet cloaked in power. To be a criminal in the Middle Ages was to live in constant tension with them, to fear them, to resent them, sometimes even to depend on them. For in their hands lay food, water, chains, judgment. They were at once the smallest part of life, and the greatest. For those who lived as criminals in the Middle Ages, the men who enforced the law were inescapable. They appeared in dreams, in fears, in whispers. Guards, sheriffs, inquisitors, each represented more than themselves. They were not only men, but symbols, reminders of the fragile line between freedom and chains, between life and death. And yet they were also human, and criminals knew this, sensing it in every gesture, every pause, every sigh. Imagine yourself sitting in a prison cell. The guard walks past again, his boots striking stone, his lantern lighting shadows. You watch him, studying the lines on his face, the heaviness in his steps. You wonder if he thinks of you as villain, or if he thinks of his own family, waiting in a small home beyond the walls. You wonder if he cares for the crimes of which you are accused, or if he sees only another body, another duty to complete before the night ends. For criminals, such men were enemies, but also familiar. You learned their patterns, their tempers, their moods. A harsh guard might deny food, strike without reason, take satisfaction in your fear. A gentler one might toss you an extra scrap of bread, allow a whispered word, loosen a chain for comfort. Their choices mattered as much as the law itself. Survival often depended not on guilt or innocence, but on the nature of the man who stood watch. Close your eyes and imagine this dependence. To hate the guard, yet hope for his kindness. To curse the sheriff, yet plead for his mercy. To fear the inquisitor, yet listen for the faintest chance of leniency in his voice. Criminals carried these contradictions daily, caught between resentment and reliance, anger and desperation. Some even saw protectors in them. A guard might shield you from another prisoner's violence. A sheriff might hold back a mob eager to strike you down. An inquisitor, stern as he was, might spare your life if he believed your confession true. In these rare moments, the enforcers became more than executioners. They became the fragile thread holding you to the world, keeping chaos at bay, even as they bound you to your fate. But mostly they were symbols. To see a guard's spear was to feel the law's weight. To hear a sheriff's voice was to remember debts owed, rules enforced. To meet an inquisitor's eyes was to feel heaven itself turned against you. Criminals lived not only under their watch, but under their memory, under the knowledge that these men could appear at any time, and once they did, escape was nearly impossible. Imagine, again, walking through a medieval street. You keep two shadows, your hood pulled low, your steps quick and quiet. At the end of the road, you see a figure in uniform, a guard leaning on his spear, scanning faces. You hesitate, your breath catches, your heart pounds. Perhaps he sees you, perhaps he does not. But in that instant your life feels balanced on the edge of his gaze. This was the truth of a criminal's life. One glance from authority could end it all, and yet criminals spoke of them with bitterness. Around prison fires, whispers passed of cruelty, of injustice, of men who served not the law but their own greed. Some believed sheriffs took bribes, turning justice into coins. Some said inquisitors accused not from faith, but from envy or pride. These whispers were dangerous, but they lived on, for in the hearts of the condemned, suspicion was constant, and faith in authority was thin. Breathe slowly, deeply, and let yourself feel this tension. For a criminal in the Middle Ages, these men were everything enemy, judge, sometimes protector, always symbol. They were the line that kept you bound, the face of a system larger than yourself, the reminder that you were never truly free. And as you drift now, you carry their footsteps, their voices, their shadows into your dreams, just as criminals did long ago, caught between fear and dependence, anger and resignation. To be a criminal in the Middle Ages was not only to live under judgment, it was to feel that judgment carved into the body itself. Chains, shackles, irons, these were not symbols alone. They were weights, pressing against flesh, reminders that freedom had been taken, that every step, every breath, belonged to someone else. Imagine the moment when iron first clasps your wrist. The metal is cold, rough against the skin. At first, it feels temporary, like something that will soon be removed. But the days stretch, and the iron stays. The skin grows sore, red, blistered. Each movement rubs it raw, until it bleeds, until the pain becomes as constant as the beating of your heart. The chains are heavy. They clink when you walk, rattling like whispers that never cease. Each step is slowed, each gesture awkward. You try to shift your weight, but the metal drags, reminding you of itself with every motion. Sleep offers no escape. You lie down, and the iron presses against you. You shift in the straw, but the rattle follows. Even in dreams, the sound lingers, pulling you back into reality. Close your eyes and picture the feel of shackles at your ankles. The skin bruised, the movement restricted, the body bent into shapes it was not meant to hold. The iron is not only restraint, it is humiliation, a mark for all to see. When you are led through the streets, the crowd hears the clinking, sees the gleam of metal, and knows immediately who you are. You do not walk as yourself anymore. You walk as criminal, the sound of your chains announcing you before your face is seen. Some irons were fixed into walls, binding prisoners in place. Imagine sitting with your back to stone, your arms stretched, your legs bound, unable to move more than inches. Hours pass, then days, and the stillness becomes its own torment. Muscles cramp, joints stiffen, the body aches until pain feels endless. The mind drifts, restless, seeking distraction, yet always pulled back by the weight of iron holding you fast. Others carried collars of iron, heavy rings locked around the neck, attached by chains to posts or walls. Each breath was felt against the metal, each turn of the head a reminder of bondage. To eat, to drink, to sleep, all were done beneath the weight of that collar, pressing always, unyielding, unkind. And yet the body endured. It adjusted in strange ways. The constant pressure became part of existence. No longer sharp pain, but dull ache. No longer shock, but habit. The sound of chains, once jarring, blended into the rhythm of life. The weight of irons, once unbearable, became simply the way the body moved. This endurance was not comfort, but resignation, a quiet surrender to what could not be escaped. Imagine yourself now, sitting in darkness, your wrists bound, your ankles shackled, a chain running to the wall. You shift slightly, and the rattle echoes through stone. You sigh, and the sound mingles with it, soft, weary, endless. This is your world now, defined not by sky or fields or freedom, but by the small circle allowed by iron. Breathe slowly, deeply, and let yourself feel that weight in imagination. To be a criminal in the Middle Ages was not only to face judgment in words or punishment in spectacle. It was to feel punishment woven into the body, to carry it in every movement, to hear it in every sound. The chains were not simply tools. They were sentences themselves, dragging the spirit down as surely as they bound the flesh. Beyond chains and shackles lay another world of fear. The chambers where torture was used. These rooms were not meant for comfort or even for punishment alone. They were designed for confession, for breaking the will, for proving guilt through pain when words alone were not enough. To be a criminal in the Middle Ages often meant living under the shadow of such places, knowing that at any moment you might be dragged into their silence. Imagine being led through dark corridors, the torchlight flickering against damp stones. The air grows colder, the smell of smoke and iron stronger. You are taken into a room where shadows stretch across the walls, where strange devices stand in stillness, waiting. A table of wood chains hanging from beams, wheels, ropes, iron boots. Each tool has a purpose, each one built to transform silence into confession. Close your eyes and feel the weight of that silence. The Inquisitor's voice is calm, steady, asking questions you cannot answer safely. To admit is to condemn yourself. To deny is to invite more pain. Around you, men move quietly, adjusting ropes, tightening chains, preparing as though for routine work. For them, this is duty. For you, it is the edge of despair. The rack stretches the body slowly. With each turn of the wheel, shoulders crack, tendons strain, muscles tear. Pain sears through every limb, until the body no longer feels whole. The strappado lifts you by the arms, dropping you suddenly, then hoisting you again. The shoulders dislocate, the body shudders. The breath catches in cries you cannot stop. Iron boots crush slowly, each turn of a screw pressing bones together, grinding until strength fades. And always the questions return. Confess, they say. Speak the truth. Admit your crime, your heresy, your sin. Each word is demanded with the turning of ropes, with the burning of irons, with the twisting of flesh. You want to resist, but the body betrays you. Pain overwhelms resolve. The mind breaks before the body does. Words spill out, half-truths, lies, desperate cries, anything to make the torment stop. The chamber itself seems alive with echoes. The creak of wood, the hiss of heated iron, the groan of ropes tightening, the sound of breath ragged and sharp. Each sound is part of the ritual, each cry another step closer to what they call truth. Even silence becomes unbearable, for silence is only the pause before pain begins again. Imagine the mind in this moment. Thoughts scatter like leaves in a storm. You no longer think of freedom, of family, of the outside world. You think only of release, of the single moment when pain might end. The body twists, the voice cries, the spirit surrenders. Whether guilty or innocent matters little. In these chambers, confession is inevitable, for the body cannot resist forever. Some did not survive these rooms. Their bodies broke before words could form. Their lives ended in the silence of stone walls. Others stumbled back to cells, scarred, broken, their confessions written in trembling hands by scribes who sat nearby. For them, the chamber lived on inside, each ache, each scar, each memory carrying the torment long after the questions stopped. And still, the world accepted it. Torture was seen as justice, as a tool to reveal truth, as a necessary weight of law. Few questioned it, for fear kept voices low, and faith told them that suffering cleansed sin. For the criminal, it meant that the body itself became the battlefield, torn between silence and surrender, between dignity and survival. Breathe slowly now, and let yourself drift into the rhythm of this imagined chamber. You hear the creak of wood, the rattle of chains, the hiss of iron. You feel the silence between cries, heavy, waiting. In the Middle Ages, torture was not hidden, nor doubted. It was part of justice, part of the fate of the accused. To live as a criminal then was to know that your body was not your own, but clay to be stretched, burned, broken, until words came or until life left. When the torture ended, it did not truly end. The chamber was left behind, the questions silenced, but the body carried the memory long after. To be a criminal in the Middle Ages was to live not only with chains, not only with judgment, but with scars that spoke louder than words, scars that marked you as broken in flesh and in spirit. Imagine stumbling back into a cell. Your arms hang useless, your joints twisted from strain. Your skin burns where iron touched it, blistered, raw, unhealed. Each step is pain, each breath shallow, each movement heavy. The straw beneath you scratches against open wounds, but you cannot shift, cannot find rest. The ache is constant, the body unwilling to forget what it has endured. Close your eyes and picture the silence that follows. No screams, no creaking ropes, no hiss of iron, only the drip of water, the rattle of chains, the soft moans of others who share the same fate. In that silence, your mind replays the pain. You feel again the stretching of limbs, the tearing of muscle, the burning of flesh. Even when the torment has stopped, the memory lingers, sharper than the present. Some prisoners whispered their confessions afterward, ashamed of words spoken through cries, uncertain if truth or lies had left their mouths. Others fell into silence, unable to speak at all, their voices broken, their spirits shattered. The scars were not only on the body, they were carved into the soul, leaving fear that never faded. For those who survived, the body healed slowly, but never fully. Joints remained stiff, arms hung crooked, backs bent in unnatural ways. Scars drew lines across skin, branding men and women with the memory of chambers they wished to forget. To walk again in the market, to return to a home, was to carry those marks openly, reminders to all of what had been endured. Imagine the look in the eyes of others when they saw you. Pity, perhaps, fear more often. Some turned away, not wanting to be reminded. Others stared openly, whispering about the chamber, about the confession, about the crime. You were never whole again in their eyes. The body spoke louder than any denial, louder than any plea of innocence. And yet life continued. Bread still needed eating, water still needed drinking. Nights still passed slowly into days. Those who survived learned to live with weakness, to walk with a limp, to use one arm instead of two, to breathe shallowly when the chest ached too much. They found strange strength in simply enduring, in rising each day despite what had been broken. But the fear never left. At night, dreams returned, the clink of chains in memory, the flicker of fire in the mind's eye, the questions spoken again and again in imagined voices. Some woke shouting, trembling, drenched in sweat, though no iron touched them. Others slept uneasily, their bodies curled as if still bound, their breaths shallow as if afraid to cry out. The chamber followed them always, even into dreams. For many, torture was not an end, but a beginning. It marked the path that followed execution for some, release for others, exile or imprisonment for many more. But all carried the same truth. Once the chamber touched you, you were never the same. You belonged to it, even if you walked away alive. Breathe slowly now, and let yourself drift into this imagined weight. Feel the silence of the cell, the ache of broken joints, the heaviness of scars. In the Middle Ages, torture was not simply a moment. It was a lifetime carried in wounds, in whispers, in memories that never loosened their grip. To be a criminal was to be bound not only by law, but by the body itself, changed forever by the pain that was forced upon it. In the Middle Ages, crime was not only judged by men. It was believed to be judged by heaven, by unseen forces, by curses and blessings that shaped every life. To be called a criminal was not only to face rope or iron, but to live under suspicion that you were touched by evil, marked by sin, cursed by God himself. The world was heavy with superstition, and every act was bound to faith, to fear, to signs that seemed to speak from beyond. Imagine walking through a village after being accused. The crowd does not only see your chains, they see your eyes, your hands, your shadow. They search for signs of guilt written into your body. Does your gaze seem too sharp, too restless? Do your hands tremble as though guided by unseen spirits? Do animals shy away from you, or does milk spoil when you pass? These were seen not as chance, but as proof that darkness clung to you. Close your eyes and picture this heavy gaze. Neighbors whisper, pointing at your limp, at a scar, at a birthmark that suddenly becomes evidence. A mole might be called a devil's mark. An illness might be seen as punishment for hidden sin. Even silence could be turned against you. To speak too much was suspicious, but to speak too little was worse. Every gesture, every moment became suspect. Criminals were often believed to carry curses. If a thief was caught, people said misfortune would follow him even into the afterlife. If a murderer was condemned, they said his spirit would wander, restless, unable to find peace. Those accused of heresy or witchcraft were feared not only in life, but in death. their bodies thought to carry danger, their graves avoided, their names unspoken. Superstition shaped justice, too. Ordeals were seen as ways for God to speak. A hand plunged into boiling water. If it healed clean, the accused was innocent. If it blistered, guilt was proven. A body bound and thrown into water. If it floated, it was said the water rejected evil. If it sank, innocence was proven, though often at the cost of life. These tests were believed to be divine judgment, though to the accused they were only terror in another form. Imagine standing at the edge of a river, bound in ropes. The crowd gathered to see if you float. The water is dark, cold, moving slowly. You know that to sink may mean drowning, and to float may mean fire. Either way, your fate lies not in truth, but in the superstition that binds the minds of all who watch. Your breath quickens, your heart pounds, and still you are pushed forward, for the test must be made. Superstition reached into daily life as well. Criminals were avoided, shunned, as though their touch carried sickness. People believed that crime brought not only earthly punishment, but heavenly anger. To shelter a thief, to speak kindly to a heretic, to show pity to a witch, these acts were seen as dangerous, tempting God's wrath to fall on the whole community. Fear turned neighbors into enemies, kindness into risk, silence into survival. And yet, some criminals leaned into these fears, wearing them like armor. Outlaws whispered curses to frighten travelers. Murderers claimed visions of spirits. Accused witches sometimes played the role given to them, finding power in the fear of others. For even superstition could be turned, its shadow used to shape survival in a world where truth mattered less than belief. Breathe slowly now, and let yourself imagine this heavy atmosphere. The air thick with whispers, the eyes of neighbors sharp with suspicion, the weight of unseen forces pressing into every choice. To be a criminal in the Middle Ages was not only to face men with chains, but to face a world where every shadow was signed, every scar was omen, every act was judged, not only on earth but in the heavens. In the Middle Ages, superstition did not only surround criminals, it shaped the very way justice was carried out. When evidence was scarce, when witnesses disagreed, when no clear truth could be found, people turned to signs, to omens, to ordeals believed to reveal God's will. To be accused was to risk not only judgment by men, but judgment by forces unseen, spoken through fire, through water, through chance. Imagine being led to the church, your hands bound, your body trembling. The priest stands ready, his face solemn. The crowd gathered in silence. Before you burns a cauldron of boiling water. The ordeal is simple, they say. Plunge your hand into the water. Retrieve a stone from the bottom. If your hand heals clean, God has declared you innocent. If it festers with blisters, guilt is proven. You stare at the steaming water, the air thick with heat, the eyes of dozens upon you. To refuse is to admit guilt. To obey is to invite pain. Close your eyes and picture the plunge. The scalding water clings, burning flesh, searing skin. You grit your teeth, your voice breaking in a cry you cannot hold back. The stone slips in your grasp, slick and heavy, but you pull it free, your hand trembling, red and raw. The crowd watches, waiting not for your word, but for time to speak. In 3 days, they will look at your hand again. Will the wound close cleanly, or will infection creep in, marking you forever as guilty? There were other ordeals, each just as cruel. Walking barefoot across red-hot iron, each step searing flesh. Carrying a heated bar in your hands for paces that felt endless, the smell of burning following you. The strappado of the soul, where the body's suffering was seen not as cruelty, but as God's own voice. Even drowning was turned into judgment, bound and thrown into a river. If you floated, it was said the pure water rejected your sinful body. If you sank, you were innocent, though your innocence often meant death beneath the surface. For the crowd, these ordeals carried a strange comfort. They believed God spoke through them, that divine truth revealed itself in blisters, in scars, in breath stolen by water. For the accused, there was only fear, the mind twisted in silence, knowing that no matter the outcome, pain was certain, and survival uncertain. Guilt and innocence mattered less than how the body reacted to fire, to water, to chance. Pleas superstitions filled the gaps of reason. If a candle blew out during trial, it was taken as sign of guilt. If an animal howled near the accused, it was called omen. If bread fell to the floor, if milk curdled, if a shadow moved strangely, all were taken as evidence. Imagine the weight of such a world, where every accident could be twisted into proof, where every misstep could condemn. And yet people accepted it, for they feared the alternative. To doubt superstition was to doubt the order of the world, to doubt God's will, to doubt the very fabric of faith that held society together. So ordeals continued, omens were heeded, and criminals found themselves judged not only by deeds, but by the way fire licked their skin, the way water pulled at their breath. Some survived, their wounds healing clean, their bodies declared innocent. Others failed, their scars or deaths sealing their fate. But even for those who lived, the memory lingered. The heat of iron, the burn of water, the pull of river currents haunted them long after. Carried into dreams, whispered in prayers, remembered with dread. Breathe slowly, deeply, and let yourself feel the rhythm of this imagined justice. The hiss of boiling water, the glow of hot iron, the rush of water closing overhead. For a criminal in the Middle Ages, superstition was as heavy as any chain, as sharp as any blade. It shaped trials, sealed fates, and filled lives with fear of signs and shadows. To live then was to know that justice did not always come from men, but from the mysteries they believed spoke through pain. Superstition in the Middle Ages did not end when punishment was carried out, even after chains were removed, even after the rope tightened or the fire burned. The memory of criminals lingered in the minds of the living. To many, their spirits did not rest easily. They were thought to wander, to haunt, to curse those who crossed their path. Crime did not end in life. It was believed to echo into death. Imagine a village at night. The air is still. The only sound the rustle of wind in thatched roofs. A candle flickers low, shadows long against the walls. Families gather close, whispering stories of those condemned. The thief who died with no confession, they say, walks still through the lanes, rattling unseen chains, searching for what he once stole. The murderer whose head fell beneath the blade is said to wander fields, his voice carried on the wind, calling the names of those he wronged. Each tale grows with retelling, each detail heavier, until fear of the dead becomes as sharp as fear of the living. Close your eyes and picture the feeling of walking alone through such a village. The road is empty, yet you hear footsteps behind you. The air is cold, yet you feel a presence near. You pass the gallows, its wood dark with age, and imagine eyes staring down from shadows. You quicken your pace, whispering prayers, hoping to reach home before the whispers of spirits draw closer. Bore the living, superstition offered explanation for misfortune. If crops failed after an execution, they said the soul of the condemned cursed the fields. If illness spread through cottages, it was blamed on restless spirits of criminals, angry that their bodies had been shamed or their graves unblessed. Even animals were thought to sense this unrest. A dog barking at night, a horse refusing to move past a crossroads. These were seen as signs that the dead walked nearby. The graves of criminals were often marked differently or left unmarked altogether. Some were buried outside consecrated ground, far from churchyards, so their souls could not disturb the faithful. Stones were piled atop the earth, not as honor, but as weight to keep spirits from rising. Yet still, people feared passing such places. Travelers crossed themselves, whispered prayers, avoided looking too long at the ground. For even buried, the criminal was not gone. Stories of cursed objects spread too. A rope used in a hanging was said to hold power, carried secretly by some as charm, though others feared it. The ashes of a burned heretic were believed to bring sickness if touched. Even the places where criminals had lived, their homes, their tools, their clothes, became objects of suspicion. To inherit such things was to risk inheriting the curse that clung to them. And yet, fascination lived alongside fear. Children whispered these stories at night, their eyes wide, their voices trembling with excitement. Adults retold them in taverns, adding detail, shaping legend. The criminal became more than memory. They became myth, part of the unseen world that threaded itself into daily life. Fear gave them power long after they were gone. Play for criminals themselves. This superstition was another burden. To be accused was not only to risk chains or rope, but to know that even in death your name might never rest. You would not be remembered as father or mother, son or daughter, but as ghost, as curse, as restless spirit. The shame lived longer than the body, haunting both family and community. Breathe slowly and let yourself drift into this thought. The Middle Ages were filled with shadows, with whispers, with fear that crime reached beyond the grave. To live as a criminal was to live with the knowledge that death itself might not free you. that your spirit would be spoken of in hushed voices, your memory twisted into warning, your very soul caught in the endless grip of superstition.